Good evening, everybody. This is Radio Free Mormon here on Mormonism Live with my esteemed co-host, Bill Reel. How are you doing,
I'm
Bill?
doing great, RFM. This will be an exciting night as we tackle our good friend here from Ward Radio.
Indeed, this is not going to be a game of touch football, not even flag football. This is full contact tackle football with Psych Ward Radio and Jonah Barnes. The title of tonight's show, I think Bill came up with this one. I love it. It's called Will a Man Rob Adam God? Yet ye have robbed me. Wherein have we robbed thee, ye say, in that you have stolen Eldon Watson's research without permission? Jonah,
He
when are
had
you going to apologize for that anyway?
right. He
So
had
that's what this is about. By the way, um, 2 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago on a night just like tonight, we did our first episode about Jonah Barnes. And actually, we had pretty much all the research, pretty much, except for the last bit tonight,
yeah.
already done because there's different ways of looking at this crazy idea that he stole from Eldon Watson, that Brigham Young really did not teach the Adam God theory, that actually there's two Adams. It's the two Adam theory coming back to haunt us from the grave, courtesy of Jonah Barnes. So you can look at that a couple of ways. Now, the first way we looked at it 2 weeks ago had to do with looking at the documents. Okay, does this make sense that if we can redefine terms with commonly understood meanings, if we can do that, and if we can change the punctuation wherever it suits our needs, then we can make Brigham Young not teach the Adam God theory too. That was basically where they came from. We talked about that. So you can look at the documents, right? The documents that they're relying on, the reasoning that they're relying on. And I mean Jonah and Eldon, what that they're relying on in order to come up with this theory. And that's what we did 2 weeks ago. And then we had a separate episode. I think that was a week ago Saturday. I think it was a week ago Saturday, wasn't it, Bill? Can you tell the folks a little bit about that? Because you came on to give hot takes on some material that I was presenting related to this.
Yeah, you went into detail about the various instances of Eldon Watson's research that Jonah borrowed from, and you built the case that he is essentially 100% entirely plagiarizing Eldon Watson's material in order to create his point of view. Now, there's two problems with that. One, which you demonstrated perfectly, is that he's plagiarizing everything. And at multiple points in that conversation, he is wanting to be treated like the smartest guy in the room. It's all his creation, when in reality, he just stole it and passed it on. But there's a second problem with this, which is that Eldon Watson tackles the problem of Adam God from a particular angle, and it's extremely limited. And Jonah perceives that by delving into Eldon Watson's material, he has tackled the issue, reconciled it to a faithful point of view, when in reality, as you'll show tonight, there's so much more other stuff, and real scholars, real historians are aware of all of that. And so while Jonah just did a little hit and run, that'll be one of his crimes you'll notice tonight. While he did a little hit and run, it was a cheap move because it allowed him to tell his audience he fixed the problem, when in reality, he left 95% of the material on the table and never showed it.
Right. And that was an exciting episode. First off, proving that he really did rip off Eldon Watson. And then showing, by the way, he's admitted to it now, then showing that they did not credit him in the show notes as they said they were going to. I took screenshots of those show notes. We'll show them here in a second, and show that after I brought that up, then somebody stuck Eldon Watson's name in there, as I knew they would, as I figured they would. That's why I took the screenshots. They even said that on the show we had 2 weeks ago, and we'll play that clip as well to prove that I'm a prophet or have, like fairly average intelligence in figuring out that was going to happen. That wasn't really that hard, was it, Bill?
No, but even when he puts in Eldon Watson to cover his ass, it's still done in a way that allows his audience to continue thinking he's the star of the show.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true. And then, see, the problem for him is, first off, that he stole. Shouldn't do that. That's the first problem. Second problem is that I caught him kind of on the horns of a dilemma, which is either he stole this without giving attribution. I mean, I suppose it's possible in a million different universes that you could come up with somebody else who came up with this exact same theory and use the exact same arguments, right? It's super unlikely, but I suppose possibly.
Except he's not that smart. Let's just be honest. Jonah Barnes isn't that smart.
Yeah, even Monkey Boy knows that, or as you call him, Mustache Boy. He knows that.
That's the
Who did that? I did that. No, who did that? But the problem is that once he took accountability for it, or somebody at Ward Radio did, by putting Eldon Watson's name in there, as I thought they would, then that puts Jonah in a worse position because we prove that that's the source. And because that's the source, we also proved that he dropped off the information that showed that he was lying. Remember about Richie Rich, the poor little rich boy?
Yeah, there were 2 occasions in that show where he said the opposite. One was where Watson said there were no references throughout all of Young's writings or other places that he knew of where there was a mention of Adam Sr. and Adam Jr. And Jonah said, oh, no, it's all over the place.
Millions.
Yes. And then the second one, as you just pointed out, is Charles Rich's son. Charles Rich was an apostle of the church, and Charles Rich's son said that his dad told him something, but Jonah claimed the opposite point of view.
It was Ben E. Rich,
Yeah.
who was cited by Watson, the source, right? The unattributed source. Ben Watson is cited as saying, giving a different quotation from Brigham Young, instead of the place where he says in Doctrine and Covenants, volume 1, pages 50 through 51, the 1852 Adam God sermon, where he says that Adam is our God, and he's the character who was in the Garden of Eden. The character who is in the Garden of Eden. So Ben Rich says, no, that's not what Brigham Young said. He said he's the character who talked to Adam in the Garden of Eden, thereby amazingly and suddenly totally clearing up this one out of like 20 or 25 problematic statements by Brigham Young. The problem was, first off, that Eldon Watson quoted Ben E. Rich to that effect, but said Ben E. Rich was not present for the sermon of Brigham Young, which immediately makes you wonder, why the hell are you quoting somebody for what Brigham Young said when you're already saying he wasn't present for it? Go ahead, Bill.
He wasn't born yet,
yes.
But he says he got it from his father, who also wasn't there.
Right. Which is why it's not attributed to Charles Rich. So you got this problem is that Ben Rich wasn't born by 1852. He was born in 1855, 3 years later. He gives a favorable, or at least let's say helpful, rendition of what Brigham Young said, even though he wasn't born yet. When you go to the source, which Bill did a week ago, I think it was, Bill went to the source, found it on the fly amazingly. He's great. Was the fact that Ben E. Rich, the son, says he heard it from his dad, Charles Rich, but Charles Rich wasn't present for the sermon either. He was on his way to Utah, I think from California or someplace, Los Angeles. So he wasn't present. So nobody was present to hear this amazingly helpful version of what Brigham Young said. But where Jacob gets caught off, I said Jacob, where Jonah in this case, Jonah Barnes gets caught off first base, is that the source that he is citing, which now he's admitted to, was Eldon Watson, said that Ben E. Rich was not present for it. Okay, at least he said that much. But when he copied and pasted that into his own document, into his own slides, Jonah took out the part from his source where Eldon Watson said that Ben E. Rich was not present for it, and then compounding the error, he presented in such a way as to claim that actually Ben E. Rich was present to hear it when he was not.
Yeah, and I think it's even worse than that. So if you or I make a mistake like that, it's just an honest mistake. I thought it read that Ben Rich was there, and instead I missed the NOT not. Well, of course, I'm going to come on the next show and I'm going to correct the record. As far as I know, he has not corrected the record, which is in, I think, a big way, a self-admittance that he was misdirecting his audience on what was going on there.
I think you may be right. A lot of times, there can be a lot of meaning in silence or a refusal or reticence to correct the record when by now you obviously know about it. It's been 2 weeks. We'll see if he corrects the record or at least lets us know about what we bring up at the end of tonight's show as well, Bill, because
Yeah.
a lot will be determined by that, whether he will deny it or claim it. If he doesn't deny it, then he's claiming it. So, did you have anything else you wanted to say before we get going on tonight's show?
No.
Okay, this is good. Oh, but I wanted to say this. So, what we're doing tonight primarily is not looking at documents. Okay, we're not looking at the lecture at the Veil. We did that 2 weeks ago. What we're doing tonight is what we're saying is, in order to understand that, yes, Brigham Young actually did teach the Adam God theory, you're not limited to examining his sermons with or without, your preferred documentation or your grammar or your punctuation. But there is a completely separate way of determining that, yes, Brigham Young taught the Adam God theory by looking at the effect it had on other people around him. How did other people react to this? Because if what Jonah Barnes, aka Eldon Watson, is saying is correct, then nobody would have had any problems with what Brigham Young was saying because he wasn't teaching the Adam God theory.
Yeah, we've attacked this 3 different ways. So the first you pointed this out, but I just want to really quickly. First episode, we went into all of the other quotes by contemporary sources, Brigham Young and other leaders that clearly shows that Adam God is being taught. Then you came in and showed he not only borrowed directly, I'll use that Thomas Wayment reference in the Adams Clark commentary, but not only does he borrow directly from Eldon Watson and use his material entirely, but you also showed how Eldon Watson he was trying so hard to be faithful that he went above and beyond what a reasonable person would do to make the data fit his argument. And now you're attacking this from the third angle, which is to show what other experts in the field of Mormon history and other folks in that space tangentially have to say about the Adam God doctrine.
I don't know if there's anybody out there in this audience who still has any wonderings whether Brigham Young taught this. If so, they will be gone by tonight's show being over.
Yeah.
And who knows, maybe Jonah will watch this and learn a thing or two, and he'll understand that actually, yes, Brigham Young did teach the Adam God theory. So we've got oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead, Bill.
He does have some things to learn. At least one of them is just honesty.
Honesty. That's why they call it such a lonely word. Because Jonah Barnes is so untrue. Okay, I'm just pulling up my own version of these slides over here in a separate thing because I'll need that in a bit, Bill.
Yep.
But let's see. Oh, yeah, Jonah Barnes. This was a previous title that we had for this. Jonah Barnes, the lying Mormon apologist who lies. I don't know. That's pretty good, too. It was a tough one deciding on which should be the title for tonight's show. But we came up with and stuck with Will a Man Rob Adam God? Because that's just funny.
I'll just say this, too. Maybe Jonah's a little like Pinocchio, but rather than his nose grows, maybe his philtrum just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I think that's it. You're right. This is going to be a 4 philtrum episode. So that's what it looked like for 2 weeks ago, right? Where he gave no credit whatsoever to Eldon Watson. And we're going to play this again. Now, this is from our show where we're watching him. And this is where I end up, it's a couple minutes long. I end up giving that prediction that they're going to change the footnotes to add Eldon Watson's name, the show notes to add Eldon Watson's name after this show was over, the one we did. Oh, whenever it was. I think this was 10 days ago. Just a week ago,
Okay,
Saturday.
so there's the hard edit that was not mine. What's the name of the guy that I'm stealing all of his research from? I can't remember. Is it Watson? Okay, we'll put it in the show notes. Now, if we'll put it in the show notes, then this was, I think, yesterday. This came out a week ago. Here is the top. I did screen grabs, okay? You're not going to find anything about Eldon Watson anywhere in these show notes. You can go check them out yourself. I did a screen grab because after this, I expect they'll be adding it.
And guess what? They are adding it after this. Oops, that was the wrong one. Thank you, Bill. So there's what I had taken a picture of, and I showed it there. There's the show notes, not a mention of Eldon Watson anywhere. So here's the PWR, Psych Ward Radio show notes as of Saturday evening, week ago Saturday, when we were doing that show, the RFM premiere, where we pointed it all out. And there it is on the third paragraph down. I've got it highlighted. It says, Jonah Barnes. Note that the sentence begins with Jonah Barnes. It says, Jonah Barnes breaks down original sources, and then it goes on, because he's doing a lot of breaking down of the original sources as only he can. After our show, I think it was later that night, actually. So somebody was watching. Then they added a few words in front of Jonah Barnes. Still the third paragraph. You see it down there? With the help of scholars like Richard Brunson and Eldon Watson. There's that name. I recognize that name, Eldon Watson. So they begin it with a clause, and then they say a comma, and then they start where they started it originally. Jonah Barnes breaks down original sources. So you see, this way, by making it a clause beforehand, they could keep the rest of the sentence intact, just like it was before, and crossing their fingers and hoping nobody would notice. Did you notice this, Bill, or did this slip by you?
So when this was entered in, I learned about it when you talked about it a couple of days after our show, pointing it out. I'll just say, by the way, again, Jonah Barnes breaks down original sources. No. Jonah Barnes put up on the screen a rehashing of Eldon Watson's breaking down of historical sources. And if you notice that sentence, the way he words that is clearly trying to keep Eldon Watson off in the periphery, instead of what a real attribution does, which is acknowledge that almost 100% of the product which you produced was simply stolen from Eldon Watson's work out of one paper.
I know, it's just one paper, 20 pages long max if you print it out. And he took everything. I mean, what was it, 10 or 11 things I caught him on? And some of them, actually, all but one, so specific as to really, I think, be indisputable this was his source. And now it's been admitted, because before there was no Eldon Watson in the show notes. And after our show, hello, Eldon Watson. So there those are, showing the before and after pictures. Now that we know that Jonah Barnes does not believe Brigham Young taught the Adam God doctrine, let's look at a number of people who are convinced Brigham Young actually did teach the Adam God theory. And for some of them, they lived during it or closer to it than we do. They had high positions in the church. For others, they're actual scholars who've done some research, read a book or two, probably went to some good schools. And when we look at these scholars and see what they have to say, what we have to say is, okay, so if Jonah Barnes says A and actual reputable scholar says not A, who are we going to believe? That's the question on that, especially when we have reputable scholar after reputable scholar saying not A.
Yeah.
So here's the first guy, Orson Pratt. Orson Pratt knew a thing or two. By the way, this is the only one you have to know. I realized that after I heard about this a number of years back, Orson Pratt and the huge fight he got into with Brigham Young, which ended up in him almost getting disfellowshipped and thrown out of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles over this issue, the Adam God theory, as well as at least one or two other issues relating to the nature of God. Brigham Young had some ideas, and Orson Pratt fought him on those ideas, and he fought him publicly in general conference as well as in meetings of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. So if Brigham Young is teaching Adam God, which he was, and Orson Pratt is fighting with him about it and saying, no, that's wrong. Man was created out of the dust of the earth, like it says here in the Genesis account, also in the endowment account, right? Man created out of the dust of the earth. Why would there be a huge fight between these two, with the result that this fellow, Orson Pratt, has to come forward, bend the knee, kiss the ring of Brigham Young, and admit that what he taught was false doctrine? Why would that all happen if this were simply an issue of misunderstanding what Brigham Young said and getting the punctuation wrong? What do you think, Bill?
Jonah acts like he's not even aware of this in all these other sources. Here's the thing with apologists and apologetics is you find the one thing that voiced up your argument, and then you just ignore everything else. But anybody who knows, like if you know, anybody who knows knows that Jonah is simply ignoring the majority of the material, either out of ignorance or out of a motivation to deceive his audience.
Yeah, and I don't know. All I know is what he said, and what he said was that this never became an issue until like the 1940s. He laid it all on evil anti-Mormons who were simply looking at the Doctrine and Covenants, coming up with this idea that Brigham Young had taught the Adam God theory, and nobody else had ever thought that he taught the Adam God theory before the 1940s, laying it at the feet of the anti-Mormons. Well, here's an apostle in the LDS Church and an apostle of some repute, Orson Pratt, who also knew that Brigham Young was teaching it, and that's why he got in a fight with him over the issue. He wouldn't have had to get in a fight with him over the issue if Brigham Young had not been teaching it. So this is contemporary, and I think this is going to be a person. It's going to be hard for Jonah Barnes or any apologist to say, well, you can't trust him. He's just an anti-Mormon.
Yeah, and they don't. Again, outside of Jonah Barnes, essentially, when pressed on the issue, every informed scholar and historian, even on the inside of the church, acknowledges it. And think about it from Orson Pratt's point of view. If like he's just confused, he just misunderstood Brigham Young, argued, like you pointed out, he gets into fights with him, he's arguing with him, he's pushing back in general conference, and everybody in the church just goes, "Oh, just leave Orson Pratt to be misunderstood and to be misinterpreting Brigham Young, and just leave him over there to wander on his own." And nobody takes the time to go, "Hey, Brigham's actually not teaching false doctrine. You just misunderstood him." It's such a strange thing, all the things you would need for Jonah's point of view to hold up.
We're talking about quorum meetings with these two going at it for hours and hours and others throwing in. It would seem like at some point, if it had just been a problem with punctuation, Brigham would have said, "Hey, oh, you're just misunderstanding. The punctuator got it wrong."
Right, correct.
So this is what this slide says, which is not one of my making, but I think it's pretty accurate. I was threatened with being released as a Mormon apostle by my quorum unless I agreed that the Adam God doctrine was in fact official church doctrine. I am Orson Pratt. So number 2 is Gary Bergera. He's a scholar. And the reason I put him up is because he's the one who's done, I think, the most research into this particular issue, starting with a paper from 1980 published in Dialogue, July 1st edition, 1980. Gary James Bergera published an important article titled "The Orson Pratt Brigham Young Controversies, Conflict Within the Quorums, 1853 to 1868. That's 15 years of conflict going on over this and other kinds of issues. And then later on, that article was expanded by Gary Bergera and made into his book in 2002 with the title Conflict in the Quorum. You've heard of this book, right, Bill?
I've got it on my shelf, RFM.
Yeah, I've read this book, and I'm surprised that Jonah hasn't read it. I would recommend it to him highly.
You should read it.
So I wanted to say a few things in here. Okay, so this is from his paper, I believe. So this is page 13 from that Dialogue article, 1980. And what I want to do is I want to read a few selections from it, which will go to show that, yeah, Brigham Young did teach the Adam God theory. Can you read that bottom paragraph? I just have the top paragraph in there because it has the title above it and the page.
Yep.
Can you start with Pratt?
Absolutely. Pratt was not the only member unwilling to embrace certain of Young's views, yet his calling as apostle placed him at the forefront of dissent. Following a strong Adam God statement delivered by Young during the October 1854 General Conference, one member observed, quote, "There were some that did not believe the sayings of the prophet Brigham. Even our beloved brother Orson Pratt told me that he did not believe it. He said he could prove by the scriptures it was not correct. I felt sorry to hear Professor Orson Pratt say that. I fear lest he should apostatize," unquote. The day after those observations, Pratt addressed the faithful in the old tabernacle. Vaguely alluding to the present difficulties, he cautioned those members gathered for the semi-annual conference.
Yeah, and you don't have to go on too much with that. The main thing is that this individual, it's footnote 20. I want to go ahead and show you what footnote 20 is. It's to Stephen Robinson, not Stephen Robinson, Joseph Lee Robinson Journal from October 6, 1854. Typescript of original in special collections, Harold B. Lee Library, Brigham Young University. That is footnote 20, what you just read. There were some that did not believe the sayings of the prophet Brigham. Well, why would you not believe it if it's, if it's just a mistake? Even our beloved brother Orson Pratt told me that he did not believe it. He said he could prove by the scriptures it was not correct. I felt sorry to hear Professor Orson Pratt say that. I fear lest he should apostatize. Why is Joseph Robinson worried that Orson Pratt's going to apostatize if Brigham Young never taught the Adam God theory? One wonders.
Yeah, I'll just add here to Jonah, if you're listening, I'm sure you are, if you're listening, what RFM is doing right now is what historical examination and scholarship looks like. You go digging for multiple sources from lots of places, and you present the full view with attribution for where you find it so that the audience can make an informed decision about where the history actually leads. So, Jonah, keep your eye on the screen.
And we'll continue with some more of that. So on February 17th, 1856, okay, that's at the very top. I have that underlined mainly because I want to show it's 3 weeks later. So it's going to be in March of 1856. 3 weeks later, both men, again, locked horns. This is Orson and Brigham. Samuel Richards recorded about this. A very serious conversation took place between President B. Young and Orson Pratt upon doctrine. OP, that's Orson Pratt, was directly opposed to the president's views and freely expressed his entire disbelief in them after being told by the president that things were so and so in the name of the Lord. So it's not just President Brigham Young saying it. You know how it is that sometimes we say, well, the prophet has to say it in the name of the Lord. Well, he said it in the name of the Lord too. He was firm in the position that the president's word in the name of the Lord was not the word of the Lord to him. Wow, spunky Orson Pratt. The president did not believe that Orson would ever be Adam. Now, this is interesting, okay, because this is part of the Adam God theory, which is there's these multiple mortal probations, and every man in mortality, if they are true and faithful, will go on to be an Adam in another world, right? We're going to go on. We're going to create a world with our wife or wives. We're going to beget the spirits that are going to go down into that world. We will be an Adam to that world. So when President Young says that he doesn't believe that Orson would ever be Adam, what he's saying is you will never, ever be faithful and be resurrected because you're not believing in the Adam God theory, part of which is that you would be able to become an Adam. So he says the president did not believe that Orson would ever be Adam to learn by experience the facts discussed, but every other person in the room would, if they lived faithful. Emphasis in the original. What do you think about this, Bill?
I think Jonah shows his ignorance when he says that this didn't come about in the 1940s, when it's clear it's happening in real time as Brigham Young is teaching it. And again, I would just say, Jonah, when you see this up on the screen, what is your explanation for this? How do you twist this in knots to make it mean something so that what you said in your original podcast actually holds up? And I will also just note, in a roundabout way, in Brigham Young's Adam God doctrine, as you pointed out, aren't we all Adam Juniors?
Well, we're all Adams in embryo.
Yes, we are. Infants on thrones.
And here's another little snippet. Now, this is from page 15 at the bottom to page 16 at the top. Can you read that, Bill, from the top and then to the very bottom of the paragraph?
Yep. Elder Woodruff, present during this clash, so here's another witness, added, quote, Elder Orson Pratt pursued a course of stubbornness and unbelief in what President Young said that will destroy him if he does not repent and turn away from his evil way. For when any man crosses the track of a leader in Israel and tries to lead the prophet, he is no longer led by him, but in danger of falling, unquote. Ooh,
That's some bad punctuation, huh, Bill?
Yeah, I don't know how you can fix this. This is going to be difficult. If Jonah's watching, I don't think there's any way he could twist himself in a pretzel and come up with a resolution for what's on the screen right now.
Well, he'll probably call us names then. Here's another excerpt from this great article. I recommend the article to everybody watching, including Jonah. Not surprisingly, now this is bottom of page 16, top of page 17. Not surprisingly, Pratt Orson felt young Brigham's blanket denunciation of him unjust, his criticisms too general, condemning as they did virtually all of Pratt's writings. On March 24th, 1858, so we're a couple years later now, 2 months after his arrival home, Orson Pratt brought formal complaint against his president, i.e. Brigham Young, before the first presidency and quorum of the 12. Yeah, this is serious. Apostle Wilford Woodruff, who presented Orson Pratt's complaints, explained that Pratt, quote, you want to read this, Bill?
Did not believe in some of the teachings of President Young and thought Young had reproved himself unjustly. The subject was discussed at length by the 12 and President Young. Much instruction was given. At the close, Orson Pratt confessed his faults and said that he would never teach those principles again or speak them to any person on the earth. We all forgave him and voted to receive him into full fellowship, unquote.
This is 1858. This is where Orson Pratt bent the knee and kissed the ring, although it didn't have the complete effect that he was assured it would have at first. Things changed, but he managed to pacify Brigham Young by basically, agreeing to anything he said.
He doesn't say that he agrees with Brigham. He says, I will keep my thoughts to myself.
Right. That's why it wasn't enough. It seemed like it was. Everybody thought, okay, phew, this is passed. And then it wasn't, because Brigham Young said, no, that's not good enough. And it continues. But once again, the main point here is to show that Brigham Young actually did teach it, and show it by reference to things that were going on with people around Brigham Young and this whole exchange. What had begun as an official inquest initiated by Orson Pratt himself resulted in near disfellowshipment for the outspoken apostle. So that can happen sometimes, and it did for him. Note, this means that not only did Orson Pratt know Brigham Young was teaching the Adam God doctrine, all the apostles and members of the first presidency knew it, because Wilford Woodruff, as well as others, described them all as being present while this fight is going on. Any thoughts, Bill?
No, you've laid it out. At the very least, the president of the church and the quorum of the 12. And again, I don't know all my dates here in terms of when Brigham Young reorganizes the first presidency, when there's 15 people instead of 12 or 13 if the president breaks off from that.
1847.
But I'll just note, as you pointed out, there's a large group of men in the room. They've all spent a considerable amount of time hashing it out. And Brigham Young spoke at such length, he had plenty of space to fix the problem by correcting any misunderstandings if possible. And that clearly comes out of all this documentation. That's not the case. Instead, it's no, Adam God is real, and you better get on board with this.
Right. Even if you are an apostle who has differing ideas on the subject. So we go to the next one. Now, this is also from the same article, where it's stated about Orson Pratt, because Orson Pratt is the one whose views ended up succeeding and prevailing and being perpetuated in the LDS church. For instance, we don't believe in the Adam God theory anymore. That's because Orson Pratt won, or at least time ended up vindicating him. We also, a big clash they were having was about the progression of God and whether God were progressing in knowledge. Brigham Young took the position, of course, God is progressing in knowledge. He will always be progressing in everything, including knowledge. Orson Pratt said, no, he can't be progressing in knowledge. He can progress in other stuff, but not knowledge. He has to have all knowledge. And they fought about that as well. Well, what do we have in Mormonism today, Bill?
God, I think Mormonism would agree that God is all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present, essentially. And
Yes.
so because he's all knowing, he has all information. But think of this from Brigham Young's point of view. Brigham Young is suggesting that at least in theory, God would have blind spots, areas of knowledge that he's not aware of that he could at some future time learn. But as all of us know, when you have blind spots, and we all do, you often believe in things or act on things that turn out not to be true. And it can throw your entire world into chaos. And Brigham Young is suggesting that God potentially has these blind spots of knowledge.
You see, I think that's the way that Orson Pratt was looking at it as well. From Brigham Young's point of view, I think he was looking more at the position of, well, what's life for eternity going to be like for me and for anybody else who's exalted? Is there really going to come a time, and has that already come for God, where he can't learn anything more because he's learned it all? And how boring would that be?
Yeah.
So they both have points to make, but once again, in this case, as well as the Adam God, it was Orson Pratt who was victorious. Going back to the paper, time has been unusually kind to Orson Pratt. In his 1932 biographical study of Orson Pratt, T. Edgar Lyon observed, as one pauses at a vantage point and looks back over the first century of Mormonism, it becomes increasingly evident that Orson Pratt did more to formulate the Mormons' idea of God, the religious basis of polygamy and pre-existence of spirits, the doctrine of the gathering of Israel, the resurrection and eternal salvation, than any other person in the church, with the exception of Joseph Smith. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?
It is
It's sort of,
interesting. Brigham Young as a prophet has a lot of things that he taught that the church has either now reversed or at least disavowed, or at a very minimum, just completely stepped away from.
yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to read this middle paragraph. It's going to end with another quote. If you could complete the quote, this will be Apostle George Buchanan. Actually, can you read this middle paragraph? And I can leave me the quote because I want to say something about it special.
Will do. Brigham Young's speculation on Adam God continued to be the center of no small controversy among church members. His belief that Adam was at once the spiritual as well as the physical father of all persons born on this world, including Jesus Christ, was never completely accepted during his lifetime, despite frequent reference to it by various church authorities, even within the presiding quorums. It appears that Pratt was not alone in his discomfort with Young's theological innovation. Apostle George Q. Cannon, counselor to Young, may have been alluding to Adam God when he recorded in his journal after Young's death the following.
So this may have been alluding to Adam God because he doesn't say what it's alluding to. But you read history and you get this idea that Brigham Young's kind of tyrannical, the way he ran things, including with his apostles. It's my way or the highway, it seems like. And normally when grown up adult mature people run into somebody like that, they tend to not like it. And if the person's above them at the office or wherever, sometimes they'll take it and they won't say what they really think because they don't want to buy the trouble. Well, what happens is after Brigham Young dies, the apostles start talking about what they really think about the old boy. And apparently it was different than what they've been saying while he was alive. And this is what George Q. Cannon, apostle, writes down. Of course, George Q. Cannon is completely virtuous in this. It's the other apostles. Here's what he writes. Some of my brethren, as I have learned since the death of President Brigham Young, did have feelings concerning his course. They did not approve of it and felt oppressed, and yet they dared not exhibit their feelings to him. He ruled with so strong and stiff a hand, and they felt that it would be of no use. In a few words, the feeling seems to be that he, Brigham Young, transcended the bounds of the authority which he legitimately held. I, continuing and concluding with George Q. Cannon's quote, I have been greatly surprised to find so much dissatisfaction in such quarters. He's talking about the apostles. Some even feel that in the promulgation of doctrine, Brigham Young, took liberties beyond those to which he was legitimately entitled. Period. End of quote. What do you think of that quote, Bill?
He seems to, at the end there, say Brigham, the other apostles, not me, of course, the other apostles feel that Brigham Young overstepped his bounds and taught false doctrine that was interesting to him, but which he had no right to delve into.
Yes. And when I first read this, which was in this paper, it's the only place I've encountered this quote, I was very taken aback because, it's interesting when you get a quote and all of a sudden you find out, you get a peek behind the curtain and people are actually acting like you would normally expect them to act, right? So they saw what happened with Orson Pratt. They weren't going to go there. And Orson Pratt took a lot of crap on behalf of a lot of other guys. Eventually, his view prevailed. I think that's the last quote from that particular article. But now we get to number 3. Number 1's Orson Pratt. Number 2 is scholar Gary Bergera. Number 3 is a bishop, Bishop Edward Bunker. He knew Brigham Young taught the Adam God theory. You know this story, Bill. Can you read the slide?
In 1892, Edward Bunker, a bishop in Bunkerville, Nevada, publicly opposed. By the way, this is where the Bundys are from that caused all the ruckus a few years ago. So in 1892, Edward Bunker, a bishop in Bunkerville, seems like it's named after him or his family, publicly opposed the Adam God doctrine, which had been taught by Brigham Young and was at that time still present in some form within the church. Now, by the way, I want to stop here and just say that's ambiguous enough that it tells me it's almost certainly the presentation at the veil. And when it's at the presentation of the veil, it's things that you would think you can't disclose. Now, some things in the temple you can disclose, some things you can't. But we all, as Mormons, worried what it was that we could and what it was we couldn't. So we just stayed away from all of it. And I feel like that's what's going on here, is that Brigham Young publicly opposed the Adam God doctrine, which had been taught by Brigham Young and was at that time still present in some form within the church. This led his stake presidency to seek guidance from the church's first presidency on how to handle the situation.
Right. So the key thing here is that this is not a typo. So Edward Bunker is not advocating for the Adam God theory. He knows it's present and he is criticizing it and decrying it and teaching against it. So now, that should be fine. It's 1892. It's 15 years after Brigham Young has passed away. What would be wrong with teaching against the Adam God theory in the Mormon church? Well, the stake president is so concerned, he contacts the church's first presidency with a question: how do I handle this situation where I got a bishop down here who's teaching against the Adam God theory? So church president, go ahead, please, Bill.
No, I'll just note Bunkerville, if I'm not mistaken, is about halfway between St. George and Mesquite, Vegas, sort of that range. Mesquite's about halfway between St. George and Vegas. I can't remember if Bunkerville's on this side of Mesquite or on that side of Mesquite, but near Mesquite, Nevada. Now, another evidence that I think this has to do with being a presentation at the veil in St. George is that church, it says here in the next paragraph, church president Wilford Woodruff and his counselor, George Q. Cannon, traveled to St. George. By the way, if I'm not mistaken, isn't St. George named after George Q. Cannon?
I think it's named after St. George, the saint who slew the dragon.
Okay. I know that that's a reference as well, but I also thought the George and George Q. Cannon played a part.
Well, maybe you're right.
He was at least partially in charge of the cotton operation when they sent the Saints to southern Utah. But I will say, Wilford Woodruff takes his counselor and they go to St. George. Now, this is in Bunkerville, a little ways away where this guy's saying this, but the root of the issue is the presentation at the temple. And so Bunker presented his arguments, after which he was corrected and told that his teachings were incorrect and causing contention. He was informed by Joseph F. Smith that the Adam God theory was considered a mystery and not essential doctrine, and members should not be preaching it upon their abstruse themes. Now, I note that I think it's been removed from the presentation at the Veil by this time. But there's
some people said 1905.
Okay. I'm glad
That's
that's
in the
good.
air. It's not clear.
That makes perfect sense then, because going to St. George, at least in part, is where you have to root this out, because there's very little of the Adam God doctrine at this point, except perhaps the presentation at the Veil in the Temple and members saying, the members like you and me who read things and thought about things and said our ideas out loud, those kind of little undercurrents of past things taught. It says here, he was informed by Joseph F. Smith that the Adam God theory was considered a mystery, not essential doctrine, and members should not be preaching upon such abstruse themes. Bunker accepted the counsel of the First Presidency and was not excommunicated. He continued his service and was later ordained a patriarch in 1900.
So let me make one comment here. First off, I think we were both wrong, but you were closer to being right than I was. I think you said George. Who did you say St. George was named after? You thought?
Well, I thought it was George Buchanan, but I thought it was one of the early leaders of the church named George.
It is George A. Smith.
Okay.
So George A. Smith, an apostle, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. It was named in his honor, even though he did not live there himself. George A. Smith, father of George Albert, I believe, personally selected many of the pioneers who were sent to settle the area in 1861 to start a cotton growing colony. Bill, very good. The Saint prefix likely came from his nickname, the Potato Saint. I didn't know about that. Earned after he advised pioneers to eat raw potatoes to cure scurvy. I think you got that one, Bill. Good job.
Close enough.
Yeah. So let me see here. What is next? Excuse me. Oh, now I want to ask you this question. Now that we've gotten that cleared up. This Bishop Edward Bunker story, where he's out there preaching against Adam God in 1892, and they send the president and a counselor down to talk to him and say, don't talk about this. Not that you're wrong. Not that you're wrong in teaching Adam God, which is what we would expect if Brigham Young had never taught it. What they teach him is quit talking about it at all, either way. And that's what they're trying to say throughout the church. We don't want anybody coming down on any side, either side of this issue. We want the issue to go away. How does this story happen, Bill? Put on your thinking cap and let me and Jonah know, how does this story happen if Brigham Young were not actually teaching the Adam God theory?
It would be impossible. They would just go and say, hey, that was never taught. Here's what really happened. They're just saying, leave it alone. Again, the modern church learned a long time ago in earlier moments such as this, that before you change something big, you need a decade or 2 or 3 of silence on the topic. And what he's trying to do here is create silence. Nobody talk about it. Orson Pratt's promised not to talk about it. I want all of you to promise not to talk about it. We'll revisit it in a few decades when the newest generation has no clue what was taught one way or the other. But Jonah Barnes would have a difficult time trying to figure out what this story is about if Adam God wasn't taught.
Yeah. It's a weird one. Oh, number 4, it was even in the LDS hymn book. You knew this, Bill, didn't you? There's an LDS hymn that spoke of Adam being God, but the specific line was changed in later hymnals to remove the explicit reference. The hymn was titled, or is still, the Sons of Michael. Sons of Michael. Michael's Adam in Mormonism. Sons of Michael. It was originally published in 1861 with the line, Sons of Michael, he approaches, rise the eternal Father, greet. Wait a second. Michael's the eternal Father? Well, he was in 1861 because Brigham Young was still teaching the Adam God theory then. But it was later modified. The 1927 hymnal changed the line to Sons of Michael, he approaches, rise the ancient Father, greet. So no longer eternal Father. It's rise the ancient Father, greet. By the way, the first one is rise the capital E, capital F, eternal Father. How did the sacrament prayer start again, Bill?
O God, the eternal Father, we ask thee in the name of thy Son,
That's
Jesus
it.
Christ, to bless and sanctify
You've got it. It's the eternal Father. So whoever, at least according to this, in 1861, when they said the sacrament prayers, they were praying to Adam. because he was God in the name of his son, Jesus Christ.
It strikes me here again, sons of Michael, he approaches, rise, Adam Senior greet, but it was changed later to sons of Michael, he approaches, rise, Adam Junior greet. So again, this only makes sense if Adam God was taught originally, and somebody wants to do a bait and switch and act as if it never was. I can't hear you, RFM.
You know, the simple truth on things like this is that if you can take it just directly, straightforward meaning, it's much more simple than having to create these huge scaffoldings of conspiracy theories to explain away the statements instead of explaining them.
I have a feeling Jonah Barnes will never, ever claim again that Brigham Young didn't teach the Adam God doctrine. Now, I don't think he has enough integrity to go back and correct the record, but I think he's at least smart enough to not step in this pile of shit again.
Well, Jonah Barnes should be paying us for the education we're giving him. So let's go on. This is number 4. Let's go to number 6. This is some guy that I think Jonah Barnes would think would be telling the truth. Joseph F. Smith. I think he was the 6th president of the, was he the 6th president of the church?
Yes. And the way you remember that is F is the 6th letter of the alphabet. So Joseph F. Smith is the 6th president of the church.
Very good. And what does the F stand for, Bill?
Fucking out there in terms
it's
of.
Not, okay. I know tomorrow's Thanksgiving, but that doesn't make this Mormonism After Dark.
All right. Excuse my language, everyone. We try to keep it family friendly, sort of.
Sorry.
I'll just say, I don't know what the F stands for. I know that the son.
Fielding. It stands for fielding.
I know the son is fielding. I've never heard Joseph F. Smith, his F, referred to as fielding.
So you can distinguish them.
I thought we could distinguish them by their Oh, never mind. Go ahead.
Well, Joseph F. Smith was an apostle with Brigham Young for quite a long time, as you know. He's not as old as Brigham Young, but they were apostles together. Joseph F. Smith. And this is from this reference, Joseph F. Smith, letter to A. Saxey. That's Asaxey. Regarding Brigham Young's teaching on Adam. This is a January 7th, 1897 letter. So we're almost to the 20th century by this point. By this part where he's asked about the Adam God theory and Brigham Young. And here's his response from Joseph F. Smith, who writes as follows: the doctrine, the Adam God doctrine, was never submitted to the councils of the priesthood. So you can see he's already making his apologetic arguments. But the question is, why does he have to make apologetic arguments if Brigham Young didn't teach it? He never says Brigham Young didn't teach it because he knows he did. They were apostles at the same time. So he never submitted to the councils of the priesthood this doctrine, nor to the church for approval or ratification, and was never formally or otherwise accepted by the church, all of which presupposes that it actually was taught, by the way. It is therefore in no sense binding upon the church, nor upon the consciences of any of the members thereof, except perhaps, and this is a weird sentence, except perhaps only so far as some may have confidence in Brigham Young, believing that he had light on the subject which was not given in connection with his public mention thereof. This is a convoluted sentence, and he's trying to pack a lot in there. Basically, I think he's saying is that, if you got confidence in Brigham Young, if you believe he was really a prophet, then I guess you can go ahead and believe this. But you also basically have to believe, because it doesn't make sense to Joseph F. Smith. Just like it doesn't make sense to Jonah or Eldon Watson or anybody who reads it when you compare with what it is that we teach today. Internally, the Adam God doctrine taught by Brigham Young is completely consistent, but it's also completely contradicted by what it is the church teaches today. So therefore, Joseph F. Smith is saying, if you think that he was right, Brigham Young, in teaching this, and that Brigham Young had some light on the matter that helped him understand how it is that Adam is our God, but he never told us how it was that Adam was our God, then that's okay. He told us all over the place how Adam was his God and our God. But Joseph F. Smith is saying, maybe not. It is thought, even if there is truth in it, that the bare mention made by President Young without indubitable evidence and authority, he's only the president of the church, the prophet of God, without indubitable evidence and authority being given of its truth, was unfortunate, to say the least. Wow. What do you think about this quote, Bill?
I go back to the beginning of it. First off, he calls it a doctrine. That in and of itself is interesting. He doesn't call it a disavowed theory. He
Right?
calls it a doctrine, but he says it was never submitted to the councils of the priesthood or to the general membership for sustaining vote. Now, we all recognize that in the modern church, they don't put any sort of doctrinal change in front of the members for a sustaining vote anymore anyway. And if we go back to like another thing that happened in 1852, which is Brigham Young saying that people of color couldn't have the priesthood.
Right.
Do we have any record of that being submitted to the councils of the priesthood or to the church for approval or ratification?
I don't think so.
That wasn't either. In reality, pretty much every doctrine hasn't been put before the councils of the church or the priesthood or the general membership for approval or ratification. So it's a loophole that he's using, but it's sort of a foul, like it's a straw man, because it isn't real. You could use almost every doctrine under this pretense.
I think that it's also a post hoc ergo propter hoc type of rationalization, which he's making it up after the fact. In other words, I got to come up with some reasons why this Adam God stuff that Brigham Young taught isn't binding on the church, and therefore we'll come up with these explanations. The other side of Mormonism is that we have a prophet of God on the face of the earth that God carefully selects by letting them outlive all the other apostles until they make it to being the president of the church, and that is God's spokesperson. And God reveals his truth to that spokesperson, and then we follow it because we believe he's the prophet of God. That's what Wilford Woodruff was advocating in following President Young in teaching the Adam God doctrine, even though Wilford Woodruff may have had some questions himself about it, but he knew he needed to follow the prophet.
Yeah.
So not just Joseph F. Smith, but also his son, Joseph Fielding Smith, and Joseph Fielding Smith's son-in-law, Bruce R. McConkie. They all know that that Brigham Young taught the Adam God theory contra Jonah Barnes. For Bruce R. McConkie and Joseph Fielding Smith, numbers 6 and 7 on this ever-growing list, by the way, we have the 1981 letter of Bruce R. McConkie to Eugene, England, where he talks about many things, one of which is the Adam God theory, and where Bruce R. McConkie admits that in spite of his public pronouncements that sound like he's denying that Brigham Young ever taught it, and if you parse it really carefully, you'll find out he's not really saying that. It just sounds like it. You got to be a lawyer, right? So that's what he does. But here he makes it really clear that he does know that Brigham Young taught the Adam God theory. So I don't know. Maybe Jonah Barnes is saying he knows more than Joseph F. Smith. Maybe he's saying he knows more than Joseph Fielding Smith, but there's no way in hell he knows more than Bruce R. McConkie on the subject. This is how it starts. I love how this letter starts. Someday we have to do an episode on this, Bill.
Yeah.
This may well be the most important letter you have or will receive. This is Bruce R. McConkie to Eugene, England, a BYU professor. It is written in reply to an undated letter from you, etc., etc. And he's going to pin his ears back and call Eugene, England on the carpet. Can you read the first of these two paragraphs that I have marked? This is on page 6 of this letter.
I just have to say about that first sentence.
Yeah.
The arrogance. I mean, Bruce R. McConkie is saying, I'm a big deal. This will be the most important letter you will ever get in your entire life. It includes the letters you've already gotten and the ones that you will yet get. This is the most important one.
Well, technically, he doesn't say this will be. He says this may be. This may well be the most important one.
But we know what he meant. All right. He says here, nonetheless, as Joseph Smith so pointedly taught, a prophet is not always a prophet, only when he is acting as such.
And he sure as hell isn't acting as a prophet if he's teaching that Adam God BS.
This is, by the way, this is such a convenient doctrine. We don't get to know when a prophet's acting as a prophet It's only after the fact whether the church likes a thing or whether the church doesn't like a thing that determines whether at a later point something previously said was being said by a prophet acting as such or a prophet not acting as such.
And when would a prophet be acting more like a prophet than when he's speaking to the church in his role as prophet in general conference?
And saying, "Thus saith the Lord," which Brigham did at times with the Adam God doctrine.
Yep.
All right. Nonetheless, as Joseph Smith so pointedly taught, a prophet is not always a prophet, only when he is acting as such. Prophets are men, and they make mistakes. Sometimes they err in doctrine. Okay, let's name those. They don't do that either. Okay, this is one of the reasons.
Adam God, and Adam God.
Yeah, it's just it's an afterthought Band-Aid fix for a problem, but never in the moment do we get any clue. Never, when that prophet's alive and saying that thing, do the members ever get told, "Hey, by the way, that was false." And the members continue to say they believe by the Spirit at the time that those things are true. All right, let me continue. I'm sorry. I digress. Prophets are men and they make mistakes. Sometimes they err in doctrine. This is one of the reasons the Lord has given us the standard works. They become the standards and rules that govern. All right, I got to stop again. It's striking me as such irony that the man who probably had as much of his theology disavowed as anyone else in the church, Bruce R. McConkie, is teaching Eugene England about how prophets, seers, and revelators are just men. They teach false doctrine, they err, and they teach things that are in violation of the standard works, which Bruce did on a million occasions. Okay.
Yep, you're absolutely right. It's going to get better.
Okay. They become
because he has to come up with some way. He's going to say, yeah, he taught it. Yeah, he was wrong. How do I rationalize this on the part of a prophet of God when I'm an apostle in the same church 100 years later?
We do need to tackle this because just this paragraph alone, I could probably stop 10 times. I'll try not to do that the rest of this one. Sometimes they err in doctrine. This is one of the reasons the Lord has given us the standard works. They become the standards and rules that govern where doctrine and philosophy are concerned. If this were not so, we would believe one thing when one man was president of the church and another thing in the days of his successors.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Like we do with Adam God, and like we really do over the past 10 years since President Nelson took over and since his demise.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I clicked a button there.
It's okay.
There's a lot
this was a view. This was a view that was held, and it's also in Mormon doctrine. He got it from Joseph Fielding Smith, I'm sure, who probably got it from Joseph F. Smith, which is the prophet of the church is not a runaway train. It is more of a constitutional type thing, with the standard works being the constitution that is the law of the church. And anybody, including a prophet, who says and teaches things that are contrary to the standard works, you can reject those knowing that they are not from God. Now we've sort of come to this place, I think, in terms of church history, where it's sort of a free-for-all. And we sort of think, well, a prophet can do whatever the prophet wants without even reference necessarily to a scripture to justify it.
Yeah, the prophets are runaway trains, and when the current prophet dies, the new prophet gets his little train, and he gets to set his train down on whatever track going in whatever direction he wants to. And when he dies, the next guy gets a train. Truth. Yeah, I just so much irony in this paragraph. Truth is eternal and does not vary. Sometimes even wise and good men fall short in the accurate presentation of what is truth. Sometimes a prophet gives personal views which are not endorsed and approved by the Lord, such as building 100 and something temples in a decade.
Notice what he's had to do here at this point. By the way, this letter has, I think, confidential stamped, at least on the front and probably on every freaking page, because it wasn't supposed to get out, because he's saying some stuff here. When you get to that last line, in the LDS church, sometimes a prophet gives personal views which are not endorsed and approved by the Lord. What the actual F are you saying? Have you not just destroyed the foundation of the LDS church by admitting that a prophet can teach things that are not endorsed or approved by the Lord. And then what are we supposed to do? Those of us who have sworn fealty to God and his prophet, should we not be following that teaching because it comes from a prophet? Bruce McConkie will actually say no. Here's the second paragraph. Ready? Yes, President Young. Remember, the point of this is to show President Young actually taught it. Bruce McConkie knew it too. Yes, President Young did teach that Adam was the father of our spirits, Jonah Barnes, and all the related things that the cultists ascribe to him. And talking about cultists, the FLDS, who believe the Adam God theory. They continued with that as well. That's what he means, the cultists. So not only does he know, Bruce McConkie know, that Brigham Young did teach that Adam is the father of our spirits. That's the crux of the Adam God theory. But also all the related things that the cultists ascribe to him, to Adam. This, however, is not true, he says, which means, in other words, that's not the way things really are in the eternities. Adam really isn't the father of our spirits. No, that's this other cat named Elohim. Brigham Young expressed views that are out of harmony with the gospel. But be it known, Brigham Young also taught accurately and correctly the status and position of Adam in the eternal scheme of things. This is not true. This is an apologetic. I've gone over this before. Maybe I will just for a second here, just for completion's sake. What I am saying is that Brigham Young contradicted Brigham Young. And the issue becomes one of which Brigham Young we will believe. The answer is we will believe the expressions of Brigham Young that accord with the teachings in the standard works. Do you want to say anything about that quote, Bill?
No, I don't have anything to add to that. You can say whatever you want to say, and I'm happy to riff on that, but no.
Okay. Brigham Young doesn't contradict Brigham Young. This is an apologetic. This is someone who's still trying to get him to say what it is that the church teaches today and not what he was teaching, i.e. the Adam God doctrine. So you got two buckets, okay? Two buckets of statements by Brigham Young. They don't contradict each other. That's the key. Not that I've seen. I've studied it pretty well. I think better than Jonah. You got one bucket of statements that Brigham Young gives, and these, another bucket. And both of these support the Adam God theory. All right? That's what I mean. He doesn't contradict himself. But there's one bucket of statements that can be used to not contradict the modern Orthodox theory, what the church teaches today. So it doesn't contradict what's taught today, and it doesn't contradict the Adam God theory. Okay? He's got statements like that. Sure. But then there's this other basket of controversial statements that Brigham Young made, about 20 of them, including that lecture at the Vale in the St. George Temple, where he is teaching the Adam God theory in a way that does contradict what is believed and taught today. Those are the group of sayings that they want to reject. And so they're saying he contradicts himself when actually he doesn't. It's just that one set of his statements doesn't contradict the modernity and the other set does. Does that make sense, Bill? Am I saying that too quickly? I've already touched on it in prior programs.
That makes sense to me. I am noting here this idea that they're laying out about the standard works is what everything has to be measured against. And then my brain wants to go to the modern moment, 2025, and at least note that this is a blueprint or like a stamp of approval for a process that Mormon leaders in the here and now can feel justified in taking us away from everything that made Mormonism and slowly move us into mainstream Christianity. Because anything that is Mormonism that is unconnected from the rest of Christianity isn't exactly going to mesh with the standard works. So the ongoing restoration and now is an effort to get as far away from unique, strange, offensive, odd Mormon doctrines and slowly, little by little, become something that looks like Methodism with an extra book or two of scripture. Mm-hmm. And a quote like this would give justification for moving that direction.
Yes, very good. And the Adam God theory was so freaking weird that even at the beginning of the 20th century and the end of the 19th, they said, we got to get away from this. And they began moving then. But notice this is February 19th, 1981, this letter by Bruce R. McConkie. I was still on my mission then. I was still proselyting in Japan. Here's another segment from the same letter. I think, Bruce R. McConkie writing, I think you can give me credit for having a knowledge of the quotations from Brigham Young relative to Adam and of knowing what he taught under the subject that has become known as the Adam God theory. I know about all these quotations too, Eugene. Here's where he links in President Joseph Fielding Smith. This is great. I don't have it in his own writings that I know of, but here's his son-in-law, very close to him, obviously, telling us what Joseph Fielding Smith said about Brigham Young and the Adam God theory. President Joseph Fielding Smith said that Brigham Young will have to make his own explanations on the points there involved. I think you can also give me credit for knowing what Brigham Young said about God progressing. Remember, that's the twin issue. And again, that is something he will have to account for. As for me and my house, we will have the good sense to choose between the divergent teachings of the same man and come up with those that accord with the standard works. So I think you can give me credit. Let me see. President Joseph Fielding Smith said that Brigham Young will have to make his own explanations on the points there involved in the Adam God theory. It sounds to me like President Joseph Fielding Smith knew that Brigham Young taught the Adam God doctrine as well. What do you think?
100%. There's something else going on here, though. You and I are aware of this. The audience, I think many of them are, but some of them aren't, and they need to know this. And you mentioned this a little ambiguously earlier, but Bruce R. McConkie has commented on Adam God prior to this moment, in at least one instance. And I can't remember the source, but I could go find it if I needed to.
Was it the 7 Deadly Heresies in 1980?
It may very well be. But in the one I'm thinking of, if it's that, the one I'm thinking of is that Bruce R. McConkie plays games with the Adam God teaching. And what he's portraying to the audience, if I remember right, is that, Brigham Young is being misunderstood in some way. So it makes sense that in this moment, Bruce R. McConkie wants to establish, like, hey, regardless of what I've said before that maybe you're aware of, that others are going to point out, I just want everyone to know, I know this stuff. I know these quotes. I know where this stuff goes to. Because when I was early in my time in the church acting as an apologist, Bruce R. McConkie was one of the people I used, along with other apologetic writings that said, we are just misunderstanding Brigham Young. There's this one quote, and it can be Adam if we want it to be. It doesn't have to be Heavenly Father. We can parse out that, the God here and the person in the garden, that God was in, you pointed out before, that Heavenly Father was in the garden with Adam. He did walk in the garden. And that was the apologetics that I used early in my time in the church. And there was something from Bruce R. McConkie that was used to back that up. So I can see why Eugene England would go, well, maybe Bruce doesn't really know this topic. He knows a lot of things. It's strange that he doesn't know this topic, but maybe he doesn't know this topic. Bruce R. is putting Eugene in his place and saying, I know this topic. Don't you or anyone else dare accuse me of not knowing where all this stuff is and what it says and where it goes.
Yeah, I just publicly pretend that Brigham Young didn't actually ever teach this. Oh, here's a big one. Let me see about this one. And by that, I mean a big piece of the letter. Here's what he writes on page 7. This puts me in mind of Paul's statement. Now, this is crazy. Listen to this, okay? Because here is how Bruce R. McConkie is going to resolve the fact that a prophet of God taught false doctrine about something as fundamental as the nature of God. This puts me in mind of Paul's statement. There must be also heresies among you, that they which are approved may be made manifest among you. So in other words, there's heresies among you so that those who are righteous can be made manifest. 1 Corinthians 11:19. I do not know all of the providences of the Lord, but I do know that he permits false doctrine to be taught in and out of the church. Well, we're concerned mostly with the false doctrine being taught in the church, I think. False doctrine to be taught in the church, and that such teaching is part of the sifting process of mortality. So when God allows prophets to lead the church members astray and teach false doctrine, then that's part of God's plan. It's a cunning plan, you see. How cunning is it? Just listen. We will be judged by what we believe, among other things. If we believe false doctrine, we will be condemned. Well, how is that fair if the prophet's the one teaching it and we believe it? He says, if we believe false doctrine, we will be condemned. If that belief is on basic and fundamental things, it will lead us astray. Notice the words, lead us astray, and we will lose our souls. This is why Nephi said, and all those who preach false doctrines, woe, woe, woe be unto them, saith the Lord God Almighty, for they shall be thrust down to hell. This clearly means that people who teach false doctrine, that sounds like Brigham Young, that people who teach false doctrine in the fundamental and basic things, like the nature of God, will lose their souls. Wait a second. Brigham Young lost his soul. He's going to have to carve out a special exception for Brigham Young, of course. And this is what he says. You let me know if you think this is persuasive. The nature and kind of being that God is one of those fundamentals. I repeat, Brigham Young erred in some of his statements on the nature and kind of being that God is, and as to the position of Adam in the plan of salvation. But Brigham Young also taught the truth in these fields on other occasions. So it's a toss-up. And I repeat that in this instance, in his instance, Brigham Young's instance, he was a great prophet who taught false doctrine. He was a great prophet and has gone on to eternal reward. Wait a second. I thought you said that if you teach false doctrines on fundamental subjects like the nature of God, like the Adam God doctrine is false, 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 that you're going to lose your souls. You're going to be damned. Well, not for Brigham Young. He's the exception, okay? He's gone on to his eternal reward, a good one, I hope. What he did is not a pattern for any of us. No, we don't follow the prophet when it's Brigham Young teaching the Adam God theory. If we choose to believe and teach the false portions of his doctrines, we are making an election that will damn us. So now, Bill, you thought it was hard being a Mormon before where you just got to follow the prophet. Now you've got to figure out what part of the prophet is saying that's true and then follow that. Because if you follow the part of what the prophet says that's false, well, then you're going to get damned.
This is why Mormonism is such a mind. It's because, first off, if I find true doctrine, that's a sign of the true church. If I find false doctrine, that also can be a sign of the true church. Then you get him saying that if you listen to a prophet teaching false doctrine and you believe it, you're damned. But then he comes back around and tells you, but wait, that prophet that taught that false doctrine, that guy's doing great. He's on into his eternal award. So the only person at risk is you and me. And then it gets worse than that, because when Brigham Young taught Adam God, he was so adamant about it. And on at least one occasion, he said that it was the Holy Ghost or the Spirit that taught him that truth. And he said that the Spirit had confirmed that truth to those around him. So one can never figure out in their own generation, during their own lifetime, that their prophet was teaching false doctrine and that they were believing false doctrine, because it's only after that president dies, and usually decades later, when someone dares to touch the topic again, that a new prophet and the leaders around him inform you that that prophet taught false doctrine. By then, your grandfather who believed it is dead too. He has no chance to fix the problem of believing false doctrine, and he's damned for it because Bruce R. McConkie says so.
Isn't that amazing? Of course, Bruce R. McConkie, good points, by the way, when he's making this argument, doesn't bring up any of the statements by Brigham Young where he says that he received this by revelation.
Yeah, we use usually in the church when we're trying to pose questions to believers to help them see how illogical Mormonism is. It's the race and priesthood issue that's used to demonstrate this. But this issue is also sufficient. What do we do in a church that claims it's led by prophets, seers, and revelators, that promises it will never lead anyone astray, when out of the other side of its mouth, it tells you that its prophets will lead you astray, that it will teach things by which those leaders are convinced by the Holy Ghost that what they taught was true, and that also the members will have been led by the Holy Ghost to have believed in the false doctrine, only to have it disavowed later. Hence, how could we ever know, even in this moment, which doctrines will be true 25 years from now and which doctrines will be disavowed? And hence, I can never really know which Mormonism is the true Mormonism, and all the other variations are false doctrines for which I'll be damned if I believe in them.
You don't get to find out until you're roasting in hell, my friend. Boy, that's really difficult. You want to side with the prophet. You want to go with him because, President Nelson said the prophets will always teach you the truth. But apparently that's not true either.
That it's not a truth that they'll teach that's not a truth that they'll teach the truth.
That's the biggest lie. According to Bruce R. McConkie. Oh, here's a snippet. Can you read this one? Because I love this one where he starts off with a no true Scotsman fallacy. I love that one.
And just before I do that, and you wonder why ex-Mormons are so frustrated that everyone has their Mormon goggles on and no one can see through the mist of darkness to know how to explain anything. And then no Mormon will even take the question, except for maybe Jim Bennett, but no Mormon will even take the question. So the questioning Mormon, the doubting Mormon, and the ex-Mormon are all left knowing that you can walk these issues into paths that show that they're illogical and irrational, and no Mormon apologist, no Mormon believer will field these questions in a way that you can demonstrate it. So you're just left with this frustration of how Mormonism reconciles itself by just adding more problems to the equation. Anyway, go ahead.
When a person is educated in the scriptures, as well versed in the scriptures, as intelligent as Bruce R. McConkie was, when we see in this letter, which was appropriately stamped confidential, when we see in this letter what happens when he actually tries to deal with the evidence and make some kind of sense out of this whole fact, not only that Brigham Young taught the Adam God theory, but what that means if it's false. When we see where he goes and how crazy his answer is, I think that one thing we can agree to, which is that if Brigham Young had not taught the Adam God theory, wouldn't it have been much easier for Elder McConkie just to write that?
Yes, it would have. And in his need to reconcile it, he says Brigham Young contradicted himself. He's contradicting himself. He's acknowledging that all the other prophets can contradict themselves. And I just don't know what we're left with and how we would know that we're left with it, with an explanation the way Mormonism tries to reconcile these problems.
I've got to say, Bruce R. McConkie did an incredible job showing how devastating the Adam God doctrine is to the Mormon church.
Yeah, there's part of me that thinks Mormonism would have been better off sticking with it and figuring out how to solve the theological conundrums in it, rather than disavow it, reverse it, and try to come up with reasons for why we should believe in a church and in prophets that could do that.
I'm sure they would have solved the theological conundrums presented by the Adam God doctrine if there was a way to.
Yeah, maybe they couldn't. All right, so here's the quote. This is another part of this letter. Bruce R. McConkie continues.
Can you read the first three words?
Wise gospel students.
Why does that scream no true Scotsman fallacy?
Yeah, because it's only generations later that we would ever know who the wise gospel students were.
What he's going to say is, if you agree with me, you're wise. We already know this from the first 3 words of the sentence. If you agree with me, you're wise. If not, you're a dum-dum.
Except that Bruce R. McConkie wasn't a wise gospel student, because now his Mormon doctrine book has been done away with, and many of the claims that he made in that book have been done away with, and many of the other theological exercises he went through to work things out have been done away with. And so here's the guy creating a litmus test for who's a wise gospel student when it can be demonstrated that he wasn't a wise gospel student.
Effectively, he's going to say wise gospel students don't follow the prophet.
Here he goes. Wise gospel students do not build their philosophies of life on quotations of individual. What does Bruce R. McConkie make a living doing when he expresses himself in his work? He tells you what his father-in-law says. He tells you what the early leaders said. He's doing that very thing. Okay, he continues. Even though those quotations come from presidents of the church, wise gospel students do not build their philosophies of life on quotations of individuals, even though those quotations come from presidents of the church. He's telling you a wise gospel student ignores the teachings of the leadership of the church and figures out the truth outside of that.
Why do we have church presidents and prophets again?
Ah.
I thought it was to teach us. I thought the wise people, the wise virgins, those 5 wise virgins, I thought they were the ones who followed the prophet.
This is worse than I remember at RFM.
Yeah. You'll be glad to know that wise people anchor their doctrine on the standard works and say, screw you, prophet. So that's basically the end of this quote. So that's amazing. But that's part of the letter. This, in a confidential letter, I don't think that we have any other place where we are closer to the heart of what Elder McConkie actually believed. There's a signature at the end. And can you read this last paragraph? It's not quite the last, penultimate that I have marked.
All right. So this says, now I hope you will ponder and pray and ponderize and come to the basic understanding of fundamental things, and that unless and until you can on all points, you will remain silent on those where differences exist between you and the brethren. This is...
So in other words, until you agree with me, shut the F up.
Yeah, but he just told you that wise gospel students should disagree, maybe not out loud, but at least in your head, you should disagree with prophets who teach anything outside the standard works. And by the way, there's a lot of frickin' Mormonism that's outside the standard works, just FYI. You will remain silent on those where differences exist between you and the brethren. This is the course of safety. I advise you to pursue it. If you do not, perils lie ahead. It is not too often in this day that any of us are told plainly and bluntly what ought to be. I am taking the liberty of so speaking to you at this time, and become thus a witness against you if you do not take the counsel. By the way, is this counsel in the standard works?
Oh, hell no.
Not, I could.
This is so radical. This is almost as radical as the Adam God theory itself. And he puts it only in a letter, which he stamped like on every page confidential, because he doesn't want anybody to know what he really believes on this.
Right. But if he shares counsel that isn't found in the standard works, but he says that wise students ignore presidents of the church and prophets, seers, revelators, certainly apostles, if their counsel doesn't coincide with the standard work. Again, this is just all hodgepodge of stuff just to basically say, I'm the boss, I'm over you, you shut up. And he goes, anyway, I don't need to repeat that last part.
I think that you agree. I think the closest he comes to citing to the standard works, I'm sure that this is out of context horribly, but it does seem to meet what it is he needs, was that quote from 1 Corinthians 11:19. There must be also heresies among you, that they which are approved may be made manifest among you. So that's why God allows the prophets to teach heresies. That's not in this quote from 1 Corinthians 11:19 for some reason, but that he uses it to say the presidents of the LDS church can teach heresies among you. in order to test your mettle and see if you'll be foolish enough to follow that prophet on that teaching.
Crazy.
It's crazy. By the way, we're about to get to Robert Millet. Before we do that, Bill, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What are you doing next September?
Next September, for my birthday, I'm
Yeah.
going on a 7-night, 8-day cruise. I'm going to put this up on the screen, folks, and just show you.
That sounds heavenly.
We reserved 50 cabins with a Carnival cruise leaving September 13th out of Los Angeles. 7-night, 8-day. We're going to, what is it, Mazatlan? Is that how you say that?
Mazel tov.
Cabo, is that one of the places?
Oh, yeah.
And what's Puerto Vallarta, right? Is the other one?
Something like that, yeah.
I think so. So, folks, we reserved 50
Oh.
cabins. 36 of them, I think, 32 of them, 36 of them are
Yeah,
already reserved. There's only somewhere around 14 to 18 cabins left.
And those are 2 occupancy, right, in each cabin?
Yeah, you can get more, but you can actually be 1 person to a cabin. You can be 4 people to a cabin. The prices start at $670 per person, and that price is based on double occupancy. So if 2 people go to a cabin, it's the least expensive cabin, which means no window, no balcony. You're at the bottom of the ship, but it's the room's the same size, same kind of bed, same kind of amenities in the room. You start at $670 a person. That means 2 people, it's going to cost roughly a little over $1,300. If you go 1 person, you're going to have to pay that whole 13 something yourself. But if you get 4 people, it's even less. But that'll be a tight fit. But you don't really spend a whole lot of time in your room. At least you shouldn't. There's a ton of fun things to do, like hang out with me, Radio Free Mormon, Rebecca Biblioteca, Landon Brophy, Sam Young, Randy Bell.
Have you announced this? I don't think we've announced this yet about Sam Young and Randy Bell.
Yeah, I should pull up the
We
flyer.
meant to announce it on Monday, but we forgot.
Yeah, let me take that off the screen for 2 seconds, just so it's not distracting. Let me go to my downloads here and pull up my image of the flyer that'll show the folks. Sorry, folks, doing this in real time, but here is.
Good heavens, look at all the people.
Yeah, we've got some rando who's going to be on the ship with us.
Bottom
Sam
right.
Young, Randy Bell, Landon Brophy, Ganesh, myself, Rebecca Biblioteca, and the great Radio Free Mormon. We might be able to secure more cabins, but I highly doubt we'll be able to get more balcony cabins. The ship, we were told our travel agent, is that the right frame? Maybe I'm not saying that right. But anyway, our travel agent who's arranging this entire adventure for us was notified by Carnival Cruise Lines that this cruise is selling out fast and that the balcony cabins are just about sold out. So if you want a balcony cabin, you're going to want to grab that right away. The other cabins, I think, will be around for a little longer, but we've only got a few more before we reach our 50. She will reach out and try to get us more cabins at that point. But the way this cruise is selling out, I'm skeptical whether we'll get those. So if you're planning to be on this cruise, you've got to get that deposit down. And I will put the links in the show notes as well as in the live chat. So folks, if you want to go on that cruise, we'll have post-Mormon events. You can hang out with all of us on the excursions that we go to. Many of us will name what those are going to be. And if you want to go deep sea fishing with me, for instance, I'd love to have you aboard to do that. But we're going to have events on the ship. We'll have things to do in Mexico. We're just going to have a ton of fun. And what this is about is us celebrating the hard work that all of you did to deconstruct this thing, to wake up from it, and to get your lives back. So this is a post-Mormon celebration cruise, sets sail out of Los Angeles on the 13th of September. And let me put that back down, get rid of that. And I'll just note here, there is a pre-registration page. It's an event. So if you go on Facebook and you look up Post-Mormon Celebration Cruise pre-registration page, it's an event page. So if you look up in Facebook events, this is the place where people are going. If you're by yourself, you want to be able to go on the cruise, but you don't want to pay the cost of just one person going. This page lets you work out a conversation with other people who also are looking for a cabin mate, and we'll let you have your own conversation there. That we're not going to help arrange this for liability issues, but if you find a person you think you can get along with for 8 days, then you'll save the cost and be able to do that together. And I'll just note too, if you just go to mormondiscussions.org, that's Mormon Discussions with an S on the end.org, and then the singular form, mormondiscussionpodcast.org. And if you just go to Google and type any of that in, it'll come up as one of the top search results. At the very top of those pages, there's a link up there, Post Mormon Cruise. If you click that, it'll take you to a page that has all the information on the cruise, gives you some outside companies to get your travel insurance through to save some money. It's got the link to get the quote for the cruise and to get your deposit paid. It's got the Facebook group listed there and some other details for the cruise. Anyway, folks, we don't want you to miss out. We're going to have a ton of fun, and we'd love to have you there with us. So we look forward to that.
Thank you. I think that'll be a lot of fun. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I think that was another slide that I had in there before. Yes, here we are. Number 8 of the people who are either contemporaries or scholars who know that Brigham Young did teach the Adam God theory. Robert L. Millett coming in at number 8. Remember him? He was a professor of gospel doctrine and church history, or whatever the heck it was, over there at BYU. He's got to be retired by now. He wrote so many books and co-authored so many books. But his background, his curriculum vitae is this. Can you read this, Bill, for Robert L. Millett?
Robert L. Millett, born 30 December 1947, is a professor of ancient scripture and emeritus dean of religious education at Brigham Young University. I'm going to sneeze. Give me a second.
He's the dean, and this is why we're going through his CV, is so we can compare it to Jonah Barnes and figure, well, who's more likely to know what the hell they're talking about?
Yeah. I'm interested in that emeritus status. That basically, when you see emeritus status, what that means is the church has told that person, we no longer want you out front, but we'll still send you a paycheck every 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Millett is a Latter-day Saint author and speaker with more than 60 published works on different aspects of Mormonism. Millett was at the forefront of establishing evangelical Mormon dialogue. He appears frequently as a commentator on BYU TV and in
BYU TV.
On BYU TV and in other visible roles at assorted media outlets as manager of outreach and interfaith relations for the LDS Church's Public Affairs Department. Millett is considered one of the foremost scholars on the Joseph Smith translation, also known, or I would say also previously known, as the inspired version of the Bible. But he is a scholar. I don't agree with everything he does, but I will at least say he's more of a scholar than Jonah Barnes.
Oh, heck yes. Robert J. Matthews was the big man on campus with the JST. It's those reorganites who call it the IV.
You called him Robert.
Contrary, I think.
You called him Robert Matthews. That was the guy who visited Joseph. That was the crazy guy who visited Joseph Smith in 1835.
Actually, I'm talking about Robert J. Matthews, who was a professor at BYU back in the 60s and 70s.
Okay,
I'm huge on the Joseph Smith translation. It's okay. And he worked with the Reorganites. They were the Reorganites back then, now Community of Christ Covenant, in order to get a peek at the actual original documents for the Joseph Smith translation, built some bridges, got a little bit of reciprocity going on, and found out that contrary to what the Mormons had been saying among themselves, after they looked at the documents, we found out that the IV produced by the inspired version produced by the Reorganites actually did follow the things that Joseph Smith wrote, the changes he made to the Bible pretty accurately.
Just FYI, I was right. That guy was called Robert. That guy's name was Robert Matthews as well.
How can you tell he's not a Mormon, Bill?
What was the weird name he went by?
Matthias. The Jewish minister.
Yeah.
Matthias, right?
Joshua, the Jewish minister.
Joshua, the Jewish minister. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but he did go by Matthias as well. You're not wrong.
Oh, really? So how do you know he's not a Mormon? No middle initial. It's just Robert Matthews, non-Mormon. Right. Robert J. Matthews, definitely Mormon.
I digress.
So what did he say? Millett is considered. Oh, yeah, we got through this. So this is a guy who probably knows what he's talking about. At least is more likely to than Jonah. And here we've got, this is audio, by the way. So there's some audio here. This is Robert L. Millett acknowledging that Brigham Young taught the Adam God doctrine. And also he refers to Leonard Arrington in here, who also knew it. And that'll be toward the end. This is like a couple of minutes long. This is audio only. This is a picture. Don't think it's frozen because it's not moving. This is audio from this picture where he's having dialogue with a Christian. I believe Greg Johnson held at Mount Olympus Presbyterian Church, April 23rd, 2006 is the date of this. So listen to this, and you'll hear Robert Millett admit and acknowledge that, yes, Brigham Young did teach the Adam God doctrine.
I'll add one thing here.
Mhm.
Robert Millett can't play games here. He's being recorded. He's talking to a Christian in a platform where some people know a little thing about Mormonism as an outsider. He can't play games. He's got to at least acknowledge the basic truths of history.
And you'll hear his apologetic, which is similar to the one offered by Bruce R. McConkie before he went totally off the rails. In other words, this was never presented to the church for acceptance as doctrine. He'll go there, but you don't go there without acknowledging first that, yeah, he taught it.
And I'll just say one more thing too. Let me just put this up. You're right to assume that maybe he's talking to a Christian, but I don't think he is. I think he's talking to Greg Johnson, who is a member of Fair Mormon, at least at one time.
Okay.
It's this guy here, I think. And I can't make the picture bigger, but it's him, but with a clean shaven face, if I'm not mistaken. So,
okay. So maybe he's asking the questions that maybe evangelicals would, the tough questions about Brigham Young and Mormonism.
Yeah. The guy on the left is an apologist. So I think that's at least noteworthy. Okay. Here it is.
By the way, Bill, this is the place where, remember where they're talking about 1% of the talks given by Brigham Young had to do with Adam God. That was something that Jonah had also stolen from Eldon Watson. It ends up being around 20 talks. This is the other side of it. When they get at the end of this quote, which we'll actually play here in a second, believe it or not, to talking about Leonard Arrington, church historian during basically the 1970s, 73, I think it was, to 1981 or so. He was the church historian. He's in a position to know. He's the one who's going to say that whenever Brigham Young talked about Adam, 15% of the time was his estimate. 15% of the time that when Brigham Young was talking about Adam, he was talking in terms of Adam God.
Yes. Okay, here's this audio.
Let's take the one on Adam God. To be sure, Brigham Young and a few others taught that for a period of years.
Boom.
But by the criteria I've just given you, it would not qualify as being the doctrine of the church, because frankly, when President Young passed away, that doctrine passed away with him. It has been formally addressed by Spencer W. Kimball in the General Conference as not being a doctrine that is sound and true. Now, the immediate response I'll get from someone is, wait a minute, Brigham Young was president of the church at the time. That's right.
And he preached it in General Conference.
And he preached it in General Conference. That is correct. My response to that would be, and this is a little tough sometimes, but I have pretty good authority on this one from President Hinckley, and it goes something like this. Latter-day Saints do not believe in either apostolic or prophetic infallibility. Now, what does that mean? It means that while we love and sustain and uphold and revere our church leaders, as Joseph Smith once said, I never told you I was perfect. And he said, if anyone should expect perfection from me, I should expect it from them. And so we believe that it's perfectly possible for a person who, even in a church position of that sort, to say something that is, in the long run, proven not to be so, not to be true. Now, there's less likelihood today by far that would ever happen than happened in the 1860s and 70s. When you consider that they were speaking in the tabernacle, to whom were they speaking? To themselves. The leaders got up and they might have a favorite hobby doctrine they'd like to talk about, and they'd talk about it. We read it now and we go, oh my goodness, he did this in conference? What is going on? You just won't see it today. And that's because the first presidency and the 12 apostles are now closer than ever before, and that if anything of a doctrinal nature comes forth, it'll almost always be coming forth to the Latter-day Saints under the signature of 15 men, okay? And so the first one I would say is that is an illustration of where, and I think this is something else that ought to be known. I spoke once with the person who wrote the definitive biography of Brigham Young, Leonard Arrington. And I asked Leonard, I said, Leonard, have you read everything Brigham preached? He said, everything that could be found. I said, what percentage would you say of his sermons on the Godhead reflected this Adam God idea? He said, about 15%. He said, I knew that would be asking me, so I took the time to study everything he said on God and the Godhead. And he said about 15% of it deals with this Adam God thing. But it's there. And we don't act like it wasn't there. And we don't say he was misquoted. If so, he was misquoted many times.
We don't say he was misquoted. If he was misquoted many times. And once again, he's trying to play the same gambit, which is, hey, it's only 15% of the talks where he talks about the Godhead. That was what it was, not Adam. The God or the Godhead. Out of all the times he talks, it's only 15% he talks about Adam God. Like that makes a difference. Do you think that makes a difference, Bill?
Gordon B. Hinckley only talked about temples 15% of the time. President Nelson only talked about the ongoing restoration 15%. Throwing out percentages as if that does anything with the argument is nonsensical, because there are so many topics in the gospel of Jesus Christ within Mormonism that any topic would only be taught at most 15%, other than homosexuality by Elder Oaks, which is 85% of the time. Other than that, every leader of the church, even in their gospel hobbies, it likely only takes up 15% of the time.
Elder Oaks and homosexuality, it's kind of like President Packer and homosexuality. It's a good thing that apostles in General Conference don't go up there and talk about their hobbies anymore, huh, Bill?
It's also strange. He says that this you don't have to worry about this happening today. Like, oh, let me just brush that problem away as a problem of the 1800s.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, like, you mean like Elder Bednar changing free agency, or Nelson changing the word Mormon, or the 1978 reversal on priesthood and people of color, the modern moment of changing Brigham Young's prophecy around that. Gordon B. Hinckley saying the restoration was essentially completed and we barely need to ask God for anything anymore. And now it's an ongoing restoration that we are in the very beginnings of. I would say it actually happens more today than it happened in Brigham Young's day.
That is a good point. I like what he said in the middle of it, which is basically, look, we love our leader. We love our prophet. We sustain our prophet. We're loyal to our prophet. We just don't believe anything he says.
True.
Yeah. We just can't trust the guy. Now, number 10, here's a more recent. Was actually given within a couple weeks before Jonah Barnes' podcast. Professor Benjamin Park, noted scholar of things Mormon from University of Houston, I think it is. I think he's an owl. This is his CV. I'll go ahead and read this CV. He knows a few things about Mormonism, maybe a few things more than Jonah Barnes. Park is co-editor of Mormon Studies Review, a member of the executive committee of the Mormon History Association, editor of the Mormon Studies book series for Farley Dickinson's University Press, a member of the editorial board of the Journal of Mormon History. Jesus, guy does a lot of things. A founder and editor of the Junto, a group blog on early American history, a founder and co-editor of the Pathos.com column Peculiar People, a member of the editorial board of Dialogue, a Journal of Mormon Thought from 2011 to 2012, and a founder and contributing editor at Juvenile Instructor, a Mormon history blog. He's been writing a few things too. Kingdom of Nauvoo 2020 is described in Publishers Weekly as Park's fastidiously researched. Wow, research, what a concept. Fastidiously researched telling of the Latter-day Saints' Kingdom of Nauvoo in Western Illinois. Park, who was given extensive access to the Mormon Church's archives, entertainingly establishes this little-known Mormon settlement's proper place, that's Nauvoo, within the formative years of the Illinois and Missouri frontier. So it sounds like he knows a thing or two.
He went further. He's the opposite of Jonah Barnes. He didn't just take a 20-page article from some guy out in the periphery who's extrapolating on theology and doctrine. This guy read a few books and went to a good school. So
And he's written a few books too. That's always amazing.
Yeah, he's no dodo.
So within like a week, 10 days max, before Jonah Barnes goes public, Professor Benjamin Park, does his own episode about the Adam God theory. If we have that next, let me put the next slide up there. I know you're going to put it up there where you play it. So this is a minute or so long, maybe 2 minutes. Listen to what Professor Benjamin Park says. Of course, he has no idea that Jonah Barnes is going to run headlong into what he's saying about Adam God within 10 days of saying it, maybe a couple weeks. This was October 24th, 2025, that Professor Benjamin Park releases this episode about Brigham Young and the Adam God theory, in which, of course, he says, yeah, of course, Adam taught it.
One of the important things to know when untangling the morass of the Adam God doctrine story is that Elohim and Jehovah did not necessarily mean Heavenly Father and Jesus in the 19th century. Now, the evolution of the LDS Godhead is much broader than just the Adam God doctrine controversy, and I might do a future video on the various different depictions and iterations and understandings among LDS leaders. But you need to uncouple those terms and titles in order for Brigham Young's Adam God doctrine to make sense. Here are the key ideas that Adam, identified as Michael in LDS scripture, which is itself a theological revision of dominant Protestant trends, that Adam/Michael and Eve had been born, raised, and died on another planet, and then were then exalted as gods after performing all the work expected by them by their God. At that point, they created spirit children, populated millions of spirit bodies, and then after populating those spirit bodies, Michael, the archangel, took on the form of Adam, created this earth, took the form of Adam, and inaugurated that human series that comes from his own lineage. Now, this idea was taught by Brigham Young in a number of settings. If you've heard people say that it was only offhand referenced here and there, that's not true. Brigham Young taught it a lot, and there are lots of other people that were mentioning it, especially during the 1850s. But the most common reference is to a sermon that Brigham Young taught on April 9th, 1852, that was published in the Journal of Discourses. I'll put that link in the video description. And it's long, but bear with me because I think we need to read it out so that you can have this firm basis as we go forward. So here it goes. Now hear it.
So he's going to go on. If you want to see what else he has to say about the Adam God theory, it's great. We've kind of covered it as well here, but he's a good speaker, great professor, great researcher. I'm talking about Benjamin Park at this point. So the question is, here's you got Professor Benjamin Park who says, yeah, Brigham Young taught the Adam God doctrine. Then you've got some schmo named Jonah Barnes who says, no, Brigham Young did not teach the Adam God doctrine. Who you gonna believe, Bill?
It's easy for me. Benjamin Park is a respected scholar. I don't know where I disagree with him. I disagree with him in places, and I agree with him in a lot of places. He's really good at history. He's a scholar in the truest sense of the word. Jonah Barnes is a scholar in the most untruest sense of the word.
In the most unscholarly sense of the word. Yes, very good. Now, here's something. Jonah Barnes, okay? We're not the first person that Jonah Barnes has caught the eye of on November 9th, 2025, which was actually before we did our first show, Bill, 2 weeks ago. But I was not aware of this until somebody else had brought it to my attention. This is written by Aaron, whatever. You know this guy, right? He's been around a long time. He's an evangelical Christian. He likes mixing it up with Mormons. Aaron Shafovalov.
I don't know who that is, but Shafovalov.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's been around for a long time. I think he's been around for a long time, I'll just say. I remember him from decades ago. So he's probably getting long in the tooth like I am, though he's a young buck back then. So he wrote an article over at MRC RM. I think that's Mormon Recovery something ministry. But this is his article. It's about Jonah Barnes. This is actually the picture he uses in his article. It's where I got the one for our slide. And this is, before we get to it, okay, this is actually something. Does this play, Bill? Do you know if this one plays? Is this a video clip or did I save that for later?
I've got a video clip here, so let me
see here. I'll
Yep.
double check this
Yeah,
myself over here. I've got the slides up here as well. If you'll hang on a second here.
It's going to be that right there.
We're almost done, folks, just so you know. Famous last words. The Wi-Fi is just a bit slow. I'm waiting for it to yeah. Yep, that's it. So if you watch this, here's the thing, okay? Jonah Barnes has been criticized severely for his scholarship by Mormon scholars, believing Mormon scholars, BYU professor Mormon scholars. And the result of this has been is that Jonah Barnes, instead of saying, okay, I'll try and be more scholarly in my research, I'll try and be more rigorous in my academics. Instead, he says, screw you guys. My stuff is better than anything that you have written. And I don't care what you say. I don't care about scholarship. All I care about is exciting Mormon boys in order to get them to be more faithful. This is really what he says here. So this is a bit of an extended clip. And at the end, there's a piece that gets quoted in this paper by Aaron Shakalov or Shakalova, whatever his name is. This piece where he actually talks about the other scholars and how none of the scholars will touch his books with a 10-foot pole. He might have said a 100-foot pole, but they won't have anything to do with it. And Cardin Ellis thinks this is a good thing. These guys are so anti-intellectual. You've got to see it to believe it.
Yes. Let's go take a poll on campus of how many kids have heard of Jonah Barnes on Ward Radio. Then let's take a poll of how many kids have heard of you, Taylor Halverson. And let's really ask which one has driven more people to have faith in the unpeer-reviewed Book of Mormon that you claim to be saying may hurt your cause if, we engage in unacademic discussions about this. Okay, so once you accept the fact that the Book of Mormon is...
Yeah, this Tyler, I think it's Taylor Halverson. He's the BYU professor. Pretty sure he's a BYU professor. He shows up, he hosts these Scripture Central apologetic videos. So obviously he's a very faithful member of the church in academia. And he criticizes what Jonah Barnes does because it smells to heaven. It stinks. It's horrible. It's rotten what Jonah Barnes does. It's deserving of all disapprobation. So when he gets a little bit of that from somebody who's a Mormon scholar, professor at BYU, this is what Cardin Ellis does. And this is what he's been doing. He's been pointing and talking directly to Taylor Halverson in this. And it goes on a little bit further, Bill. Did you want to say anything before we continue?
No, I don't have anything to add. I can keep playing it if you want me to.
Please.
Okay.
Unpeer-reviewed, and your entire job at the university is to try and
is
build,
a sham.
build faith in the thing.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Well, now that you're done lording over it like Anton Ego and writing your crappy reviews, you start realizing, crap, more kids have heard of Jonah Barnes in Ward Radio than have heard of you. So maybe you're not doing as good a job as Jonah Barnes is in Ward Radio. And if you're fearful that maybe we're stepping on landmines that might cause the academic community to, reject it more than they've rejected, or why don't you pitch in and help out, pal?
Yeah, I don't know why we're so desperate to make friends with these people.
No, let's keep going. I'm listening to Taylor Halverson.
There are times when a critic truly risks something.
Oh, so there are times where the professor truly risks something. What is that time, Taylor? What is that time?
And that is in the discovery and defense of the new. The world is often unkind to new talent, new creations. The new needs friends.
You cut that, Bill? So here's where Carden Ellis is via Disney on this movie I never saw. I think it's Ratatouille. But he's going to make the mistake of conflating the new with the true. So if it's new, it's got to be true. So he's saying you need to be there for sacrifice for the new. But hopefully, if the new thing is something that's true and correct, then it's worth the sacrifice. If the new thing is something that's false and incorrect, then it should not be respected at all. And there's still some more to play.
Okay.
It's a bit longish. I wanted to pepper in a few comments because I won't remember them all by the end.
I'm a little nervous about them playing Disney music, which will definitely get us in copyright issues. But let me.
Well, they did it. I mean, I think it's done. They
Okay.
played that clip on their show.
Here we go.
Laka. So there you are, bro. There you are.
Good metaphor.
It's a good metaphor. You know, you were unkind to the new, Taylor, and you're a hypocrite because all of your web presence talks about how you're a master learner and how that you're all about entrepreneurship and you're all about creating positive experiences, engagement, and all of that fluff. But when the rubber meets the road, you were cruel and you were unkind to the new. And yes, I'm going to turn this into the 30-second promo of this book. You know what I'm saying? I realize I have it held up right here and it's going to get clicked.
This is
You know
the
what I'm saying?
Ratatouille, the literary
Yeah.
Ratatouille here.
We just found a way to incorporate Disney into this episode. I'm sorry. This pisses me off.
Apparently.
All the Halversons I've met have been good people. Wholly decent in every way. He's besmirching a good family name. So I'm done.
Well, look, and look, this is not just Dr. Taylor Halverson who thinks this way. Every academic who's come across my book thinks this way. They won't touch it with a 10-foot pole. They are, and our show and Dave Butler and these guys, they won't touch it. Our one inside man is Dr. Mike Day, who somehow snuck under their radar and he's our inside man.
Oh, he's probably like, he's going to literally send me a text message to be like, please edit that out. Please edit that out. Please.
Yeah. But I think it's worth saying, like, these are the people we've been fighting against. Jesus Christ couldn't stand the scribes. Joseph Smith was mocked by these people. The learned men and the doctors and the lawyers. We are not supposed to like deprioritize our faith to try to kiss up to these people. Like to kiss up to this cause that I'm damaging. What cause? Whose cause? What are you talking about? Building the kingdom of God? Among whom? Among the ivory towers of Yale? I don't give a crap what those people think. Yeah. I'm getting teenagers and young men to fall in love with the Book of Mormon again. Yeah. Well, what do I care what some doctor at Yale thinks?
Hey, but we believe in the gospel.
Did you think I was kidding, Bill?
All right. So you may not remember this. I sent you a couple of things. So let me remind people really quickly. I got to give me 2 seconds here. This will go right along with what
they were very nice things too. They were very nice things. Yeah. I mean, this is the most anti-intellectual argument I've ever heard in my life. It is brazenly anti-intellectual. I will tell you that many years ago when I was writing a paper for BYU Studies and Jack Welch was shepherding it through as the editor. And, he was telling me this has to be corrected. And I went, really? Because it was going to be a lot more work and I didn't want to do it. I'd already done a ton of work on this paper. He says, well, you got to figure this thing out. I said, really? And I did something that was a bit slipshod. And he sent it back to me, emails. He says, Radio Free Mormon, we have to be rigorous in our research. And I've never forgotten that.
Yeah. They're playing a game here. Again, they're telling you that it's all in the name of helping the youth of the church be strong. But when you teach the youth of the church false views of history, the church has had to learn this lesson the hard way. It's the reason the gospel topic essays exist, is because the church was told over and over and over and over again that people felt betrayed by learning a false view of history, that the church was so dishonest and withholding of things. So I sent you some things a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about this Jonah Barnes issue. I want to remind people first, the the episode with Richard Nygren, in the top right-hand corner there is Robert Boylan. Robert Boylan is a racist jerk. And that's probably the nicest things I could say about him. He's also the one who did the Desnat stuff with Brigham Young holding knives and death to progmos, for instance.
Yes.
He also had memes that were threatening the life of those of apostates who had left the church. This is not a nice guy. But Jonah Barnes makes this argument that nobody will deal with his scholarship. Now, Robert Boylan has dealt with it, and here's what Boylan says. Now, the reason that's highlighted is because I went back into our text messages and I did a search and I started typing in Boylan, B-O-Y-L, and then as soon as I got that far, it showed me my text message with you. This is in an article about Jonah Barnes' scholarship. Robert Boylan, a popular but oft profane Irish LDS apologist, also appears in the Calvary discussion, having seen a draft of Key to the Keystone. That's a book written by Jonah Barnes. Boylan's verdict was, and I'm going to use bad language again, Boylan's verdict was pointed, quote, "I read a draft of Barnes' book. It is shit," unquote. That's Robert Boylan. That's an inside man who's a piece of, excuse my language, shit too, who's done really horrific things. He invented Richard Nygren. Richard Nygren, the first time that name came out of anyone's mouth was Robert Boylan. He's made threats against progressive Mormons and apostate Mormons, and he says Jonah Barnes' scholarship is shit. Then he follows that up by saying, responds to Barnes' claims. So this is what Boylan says directly about what Barnes is saying. Quote, "I am not a fan of lousy arguments against the church. I am also opposed to poorly researched and argued apologetic arguments. This post is aimed at a recent lousy apologetic concerning Brigham Young and his Adam God theology." Robert Boylan is agreeing with us, and he's saying that Jonah Barnes' scholarship on the Adam God is lousy and it's shit. So there's that.
Yeah, and actually, I was putting this up here, Bill. If you can take that link at the top left of that, maybe put it in the show notes. That goes to the article that you're quoting from.
Gotcha.
If we can get that up here on the screen.
Yeah, it's going to take me a minute.
Yeah, if you'll just go ahead and put up the screen. I know it's going to take you a minute. This is the actual article from which Bill was quoting. But the article is by Aaron Shafalovov. And but in it, he's quoting a number of people, including Robert Boylan. And so he's talking about Jonah Barnes. He's another LDS apologist goes rogue. So this is from November 9th. This is responding to this same video that we've been talking about, only you had sent it to me, and that's when I first saw it, Bill. So let me see here. Yeah, if you go right here, just the very beginning part, it's great stuff. In recent months, several people have asked me about Jonah Barnes, a rising voice in the world of Latter-day Saint apologetics and frequent guest of LDS podcasts. Barnes has gained attention through his punchy books and combative rhetoric. He represents a cultural shift that Kyle Bashirs calls gig Mormonism, a phenomenon where authority is crowdsourced and accountability is optional. This comes with an increasingly dismissive attitude toward the LDS Church's own prophetic tradition. We see that in Barnes, don't we? Moral standards of online conduct, also dismissive, and community of trust. Do you want to read the second paragraph in the introduction, Bill?
Jonah's work has been recommended by LDS apologist Jacob Hansen. That explains a lot.
Yeah.
And millionaire Russell Brunson. Isn't that the other guy that Jonah Barnes?
Was it Russell or is it a different Brunson? Was it a Richard Brunson?
Maybe
I can't remember.
You're right. Maybe it's a different one. But his obdurate, is that obdurate? Obdurate. Pattern of factual, I feel like I'm in the third grade sometimes and you're
doing great.
Pattern of factual errors has not gone unnoticed. Increasingly, other Latter-day Saints are voicing concern about his credibility.
Yeah. And I'm one of them.
Yeah.
So, Key to the Keystone and the Apocrypha Project. By the way, so this is the premise of his first book, Key to the Keystone. Barnes' rise began with the Key to the Keystone. In that book, he claims that the discovery of various apocryphal Adam, Enoch, and other Second Temple traditions, i.e., pseudepigrapha, now allows us to reconstruct, in effect, the contents of Lehi's brass plates. Are you freaking kidding me? Apparently, that's the premise. He further argues that those plates underlie both the Book of Mormon and later Latter-day Saint temple liturgy. Oh, yeah, sure thing. Can you read the next paragraph, Bill?
Promotional copy describes the book as using paleography and I forget it.
Philology.
Philology. There you go. Thank you. Not phrenology, like the study of the head that they did with Brigham Young, but philology, to identify which books were on the brass plates, who corrupted the Old Testament canon, and how apocryphal sources answer questions about Lucifer, Eve, Abinadi, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and the two messianic character of the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, the crazy thing is that in some apocryphal books, they end up writing books after Jesus, right? But they write them under the name of people who lived before Jesus, like Adam and Eve. And amazingly, when you write a book in the name of Adam and Eve or somebody else from Old Testament times, but you're writing the book after Jesus came and you're a Christian, all of a sudden you're writing this, or they were writing this in such a way as to put an incredible knowledge of Christianity into the mouth of the person who lived before Jesus, right? So this is what is being quoted. It's a common tactic by apologists to try and account for how it is that all those people in the Book of Mormon before Jesus came knew so much about Jesus. Well, the answer is in the exact same way that the people who wrote the Apocrypha after Jesus, but put it in the mouths of people who lived before Jesus, were able to do it.
Yeah, I notice here that the first person who he points to as having something to say on this is Spencer Krause, also Robert Boylan's right-hand man, who also was involved in the Richard Nygren affair. So Spencer.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Well, if you go back up there, you got Spackman too. In the mouths of two or three witnesses,
yeah.
still Jonah Barnes' crappy scholarship be attested. The sharpest criticism of Barnes' work has come from other Latter-day Saints. This is what was going on in that clip. In an influential Facebook group for Latter-day Saints called The Cavalry, yeah, really influential, but there's people there. One member asked in September 2024 for opinions on Ward Radio and on Key to the Keystone. In response, LDS scholar Benjamin Spackman, you've heard his name, haven't you, Bill?
Yeah, Fair Mormon.
Described Ward Radio and its regulars as, quote, the definition of amateur, zeal without knowledge, and fool's gold. That's Psych Ward Radio. He concluded, quote, so yeah, I am not a fan and wish people would not give them any attention. Period. End of quote from Ben Spackman. Can you take the next one?
That's saying a lot from an apologist who bends things and obscures things and ties things in knots. In that same thread, Spencer Krause points to an example from Barnes' work. Barnes had claimed that the book of Jasher depicts Satan disguising himself as God in order to trick Abraham into sacrificing Isaac.
Okay, hang on a second here, because this is really interesting, okay? So what he's trying to do is he's trying to liken Apocrypha to Mormon scripture. This is what I did for years. But what he says is that the book of Jasher, this is what Barnes claims. This is not what the book of Jasher teaches. But Jonah Barnes claimed that the book of Jasher depicts Satan disguising himself as God, right? Worship me, I'm the son of God, Moses 1, right? Disguising himself as God in order to trick Abraham into sacrificing Isaac. So that's how Jonah Barnes represents Jasher to make it sound so Mormon. But the truth is a lot less impressive. Please continue.
Krause notes that Jasher, in fact, portrays Isaac as eager to be sacrificed, God as approving, and Satan as appearing repeatedly to stop the sacrifice.
So, in other words, he gets everything wrong. You would have to be doing this on purpose.
Yeah, which coincides with the two occasions from the Adam God paper where Barnes claims that the author of that paper was was arguing the opposite, or Barnes claimed the opposite, when in fact the author of the paper was doing a 180 from what Barnes was trying to portray. And he says it here. He says, on Krauss's reading, every other text Barnes cites likewise says the opposite of what he thinks, leading him to warn fellow Latter-day Saints, do not trust Barnes with a 100-foot pole. By the way, don't trust Spencer Krauss either with a 100-foot pole. But these guys, as deceptive as they are, they think that Jonah Barnes' scholarship is sketchy and should be doubted.
It's like when you get to prison on a murder rap. Who's at the bottom of the totem pole in prison, Bill? Do you know? Any ideas?
It's the pedophiles.
Yeah. And so this is basically what Jonah Barnes is. By analogy, okay, if he's in prison with all the other apologists and they're there because they kind of lie and cheat and slant stuff, Jonah Barnes is at the bottom of the totem pole, even in prison, because even the other criminals know that what he does stinks. That's where the 100-foot pole came from, though, by the way. I said 100 foot. This is where the 100-foot pole came from. He says Latter-day Saints should not trust Jonah Barnes with a 100-foot pole. Please go ahead.
He's the Ward Christofferson, allegedly, of the situation.
Ward or Wade?
Wade Christofferson, allegedly.
Yes, Wade. Right, the new guy who just got turned in to jail, right?
Yeah.
So Robert Boylan, a popular, this is where you got that quote from. He said, I read a draft of Barna's book. It is stinky poo. Now, Benjamin L. McGuire piles on. Did you want to say anything more about that quote, Bill?
No, I'll say this, though.
Yeah.
I agree with the fair Mormon apologist here. What they're perceiving, Jonah Barnes reminds me of me in the first 3 years I joined the church. Everything I read that I saw some insight I felt like could be connected to the church being true, I would take to church and I'd read it in my talks. I'd share it in my home teaching messages. And then after about 3 years, I learned that about 80% of the stuff I was finding on the internet about Mormonism that was faith promoting were embellished stories, things that didn't add up, misinterpretations of scripture. And it's like Jonah Barnes is still in that really simple beginning stages of defending the church where he just doesn't do the hard work of scholarship.
He's such an infant. So this is Benjamin L. McGuire, who I've actually known for a number of years in a virtual kind of way for message boards. But we're not going to read this whole thing. If you want this, please look this up, this paper. It's pretty fun. But this is what Benjamin L. McGuire says. He's a Latter-day Saint. He's a contributor to apologetic forums. He's a straight shooter, though, I think. And that's been my experience with him. And journals such as Interpreter. He critiqued the basic thesis behind the key to the keystone. He writes, quote, Jonah Barnes, from my perspective, doesn't know what he is talking about. I'd call that critiquing the basic thesis. He doesn't know what he's talking about. It's not just us. Everybody's out there saying it, including, and perhaps especially, faithful LDS scholars and even professors. So that was the main thing I wanted to read there. It goes on with some more detail, but we're already over 2 hours into this. If we can go down a little bit further on this and just keep going. There's some quotes on it. Let me see here. Are those the quotes you read?
No, this it was Boylan stuff. So I think maybe there's a section of, in fact, if I just do a Control F for Adam. Whoop.
Yeah, it's past this section. There you go. Adam God. Brigham never taught this. Can you start that one off?
Absolutely. So Adam God, Brigham never taught this. Latter-day Saint Scott Adams, a former LDS bishop, an outspoken online defender of the church, gave a recent Ward radio show with Jonah Barnes a glowing endorsement. What do you get when you take Hugh Nibley, add some rock and roll and baker's yeast, allow to proof and bake at 350? You get Jonah Barnes.
I'm sure that's true, but not in a positive way.
Yeah, a little too much yeast. If you only ever watch one episode of Ward Radio, watch this one.
Watch the crappiest one in the history.
Yeah, here's the context to bury the Adam God theory as an attack against the church and to drive a stake through its heart forever or 2 weeks, whichever one is less. So good. So good. Don't sleep on this one.
So the article goes on, according to Adams, the single episode buries the Adam God problem. In the program, Barnes says he is a little skeptical that the Adam God theory ever actually really happened. He grants that critics claim Brigham Young taught that Adam, the first man, was also God the Father, but insists the whole thing is a confusion. In his telling, Adam God is a tangle of scribal errors, misunderstood titles, bad punctuation, and unreliable copies of sermons, which later missionaries and anti-Mormons spun into a doctrine that Brigham himself never held. And then, but by the way, Aaron, I can't remember. I'm sorry about your last name. Maybe someday you'll be able to tell me how to pronounce it correctly. But Aaron, the author of this article, he didn't pick up on the cribbing, the plagiarism from Eldon Watson, but he does do what we did in our episode 2 weeks ago. And if you look down there, number 1, Adam is a title, not a name. Misreadings in DNC 137. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. Repunctuating Brigham Young. We talked about that. Dismissing the Journal of Discourses. By the way, this is going to be very, very important here about dismissing the Journal of Discourses, but we're not there yet. So if we can go down just a little bit further, those are the Robert Boylan quotes, right? So Boylan then lists his comments, the 6 points: multiple independent accounts of Brigham Young teaching this. 2, contemporary interpretation. That's what we talked about tonight. 3, Legine Caruth's work. Remember, she's the one who went back and checked the Pittman shorthand to see how she interpreted it versus how it was interpreted in the Journal of Discourses. This is so important, Bill. Could you read this? Because remember that Jonah Barnes said that what she said, or Cardin Ellis maybe said it, one of the two, said that this person's an expert in this, and what she said is that their representation that you should not leave the church over anything that's in the Journal of Discourses, because you can't trust anything that's in there. That's really not what she said. This is closer to what she said.
Yeah, it cuts the other way. Barnes leans heavily on the idea that the Journal of Discourses is unreliable, but Boylan calls this use of Legine Caruth's research, quote, not intellectually honest, unquote. Caruth has transcribed the original Pittman shorthand of many Brigham Young sermons for the Church History Library. Boylan notes that, quote, Adam God is taught in her transcriptions, unquote, and further reports that he asked her personally twice whether Brigham taught Adam God. Quote, she said he did, though, as with me, is scratching their head as to what exactly he meant, unquote.
So here's this expert in Pittman shorthand who retranslates a lot of the sermons from the Pittman shorthand. And guess what happens when she does that? It teaches Adam God.
Yeah, it cuts the other way.
Jonah Barnes has been doing nothing but lie to his audience.
That's the third time he does a 180 with what the original intent of the person was.
Yeah, you cannot trust anything Jonah Barnes says, especially if it's favorable to the church, because he will twist and lie in order to defend the church, which is unfortunate that you kind of have to do that.
And so, that's Cardin Ellis, but it still just bodes negatively for Ward Radio. They're just a bunch of hacks who are trying to entertain their audience. They're not really there to tell the truth. They're there to get views and to make you laugh.
When your biggest cheerleader is Cardin Ellis, maybe you should do some introspection. So Boylan also mentions the Orson Pratt debates. We talked about that tonight. The 1877 lecture at the Vale. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. And the titles do not rescue Barnes. We talked about that 2 weeks ago. So then Sarah Allen, can you read this part about Sarah Allen? Did you know her at Fair, Bill?
Nope, I did not know her, and not sure when she joined and what her role. I see that she's a senior researcher. Don't know what that means, if she's just been there a long time or what. But no, I'm not familiar with her. Sarah Allen, a senior researcher for Latter-day Saint apologetics organization FAIR, also pushes back against the dismissive posture against the text of the Journal of Discourses in a discussion of Barnes' episode in the Thoughtful Saints Facebook group. That's Jacob Hansen's Facebook group. She writes, quote, and no, quotes from the Journal of Discourses should not be thrown in the trash. They should be checked against the original shorthand transcripts in the parallel column transcriptions here, unquote.
Doesn't that make sense?
Yeah.
Doesn't that just make sense? Don't throw it in the trash. Check it against the Pittman shorthand transcriptions.
Yeah, I was going to try to click this. I don't know if maybe it shows up if I do that. Yeah. Anyway, I was going to see if that link takes us to the place where the Pittman shorthand can be seen in the columns, but it's not.
Apparently, that's to the footnote that says when it was she made the comment.
Looks like it's right here. Church History Catalog, where you can read, I'm assuming it's here, you can read the Pittman shorthand next to the Journal of Discourses.
If you can read the Pittman shorthand, thank goodness somebody can.
Yep.
Because Pittman shorthand says, Brigham taught Adam God, Jonah.
All right, I'll go back to that paper.
And that's really about the end of this article that I wanted to quote. The last part is a plea to my Latter-day Saint friends, which is basically come to Jesus. He is an evangelical after all.
You know, they're telling the Ward Radio audience that they are not being taken seriously, and they're telling their audience there's reasons for that. And the reasons are that nobody wants to upset the cart. Nobody wants to rile the church up. Nobody wants to get things sort of going in a different direction. But that he's on to something and everyone's ignoring it. They're not ignoring it. They think his scholarship is not good. They think he's a hack. The people who are willing to lie and deceive at every twist and turn think he's got bad scholarship.
Can you imagine an amateur such as Jonah Barnes, and I don't mean it derogatorily, he's just an amateur.
Yeah,
Can you imagine an amateur such as Jonah Barnes or myself or any other amateur, or even a professional, frankly, who gets so roundly rebuked on his research by the academic community, even those who are most likely to want him to be right, to get rebuked by them? And his response isn't, okay, I need to work harder and learn my craft better. His response is, screw all of you. You're not as popular as I am. I'm getting the kids really enthusiastic about all this crazy ass research that's not true that I'm teaching them. So my work is better than yours.
Yeah. Everyone outside of Ward Radio and their audience is telling you that Jonah Barnes is a hack.
And he's not only that, now we finally get to the thing we've been teasing. Seems like forever now. Because after that first episode 2 weeks ago, there's been a lot of research done by some people, not Jonah Barnes. But one of the people who did some research on it ended up coming up with this. Okay. Now, hopefully, maybe we can put ourselves below, or I can do that. Let me see here. If I do that, that's a little better. So what this is a criminal docket. And this is for a guy named Jonah Barnes. Now, I'm just going to say this is for a guy named Jonah Barnes. I don't know if this is our Jonah Barnes. He has the same name. Let's look at what happened in this criminal case with Jonah Barnes. I'm going to try and make this so I can see it a little bit better on my other screen. Here it is. So this is Provo City versus Jonah R. Barnes. That's how this is titled. Jonah R. Barnes, B-A-R-N-E-S, spelled the same. The first charge, this is from September 16th, 2006 is the offense date. There's a charge against this Jonah Barnes by the Provo City Police Department, I imagine.
By the way, just really quick, I just want to note, middle initial is the same as well. Jonah R. Barnes, author of...
Are you showing something? Are you showing something right there? I can't see everything.
Yeah, no, yes, I am. Let me grab this off.
That's okay.
I'm just showing his book, The Key to the Keystone, authored by Jonah R. Barnes. So that is the same first name, same middle initial, same last name. That would be a coincidence, but maybe.
So let me talk about this and we'll just see what it is. Amazingly, what he gets charged with is theft. It's just too good, isn't it? Jonah R. Barnes, back in 2006, got charged with a class B misdemeanor, which usually has to do with the value of whatever it was. It wasn't a car. I'm not sure what it was from the docket, but it was something that he took that wasn't his. Got charged with theft, class B misdemeanor. And down on the left side, there's a few more yellow marks that I put in there as highlights. By the way, we do have the date of birth. Can anybody out there check? Because I checked, I didn't find it. Jonah Barnes' date of birth, because this Jonah R. Barnes, his date of birth is December 18, 1983. That's the only thing I'm not sure of.
You want to take
So
a bet? Do you want to take bets on it? I'll bet you. I don't know.
which are you betting? Because
I'm
I would bet you, but I would bet that it is his birthday.
I'm betting it's his birthday too.
Okay, I guess we can't have a bet because I think we're both on the same side of this bet. But it's December 18, 1983. Provo City Police. So what happens is this: he gets arraigned on his charge of the misdemeanor, Class B misdemeanor of theft. And what they do is they continue it over for another hearing. On October 23rd, he shows up and he pleads guilty. This Jonah Barnes pleads guilty to theft. It's continued over for 3 months. The disposition is guilty, but it's a plea that's held in abeyance for 3 months, which means he pleads guilty to it, according to this, my understanding of it. And I've got it circled there. He pleads guilty to it, but then it's held in abeyance for 3 months. As long as he does what he's supposed to do, which here is basically pay $100 and keep your nose clean for 3 months, and we will erase it from your history. We'll dismiss it from your history. And if we go over here to the next page, which is the last page of this docket, you can see that on February 14th, Valentine's Day, 2007, the following year, 3 months later, charge one, the disposition was dismissed. So he pleads guilty to it. It's on his record as a guilty plea for 3 months. Then it gets dismissed because he paid his $100 and didn't get into any more trouble at that point. So the physical file was destroyed, but the docket tells the tale. Do you have any comments you want to make about this before we go on, Bill?
The only thing I want to say is, one of the things I look for is, because I want to give a kid a break if this was like a juvenile thing or whatever. But this Jonah Barnes was born in 1983. And again, I'm assuming, but my hunch is that our Jonah Barnes also has a December 18th, 1983 birthday too. That would put him at what, 23 years old?
Yeah, 23, 24.
22 maybe, because he would turn 23 in December.
Right, but he's born in 1983, right? Is that correct, Bill?
Yep.
Okay, so 83, 93, 2003 is 20, 2007. He would be 24 that year,
yes,
but not until December. So he's basically 23. You're right.
Yeah, but the crime was committed September 16th of 2006. That's what I'm going off of.
Yeah, and he'd still be 23 in February of 2007.
Yeah, so he was 22 years old, going to turn 23 in like 2 more months.
I think you're right, 23.
Still a kid. I'm going to cut a little break here, but I have to say it is hilarious that here we are pinning his ass to the wall for plagiarism, which is a form of theft. You're stealing the intellectual property of another person without following the rules of when you do that, to be able to do it in a way that's appropriate. And then to find out that as a young adult, Jonah Barnes was also, this Jonah Barnes anyway, was shoplifting or taking something from somewhere, and admitted that he was guilty and got in a little bit of trouble. By the way, when you announced that you were doing the episode To Catch a Thief, strangely, not saying it's connected, but coincidentally, Jonah Barnes took down his Twitter account, X account, which is a thing that you do when someone's about to say something embarrassing about you, so that you sort of shut down comments being made for a little while.
And it's possible. I don't know. It looks like he was in a bunch of hot water already from that article written by Aaron Shekaloff. But yeah, he took it down right before our episode went up, after we had advertised that it was going to be titled To Catch a Thief.
Yeah.
So I don't know. You're the one who thought maybe it's because he thought we were going to bring this up, and we didn't, because we didn't know about it then, but we found out about it later. So now we're presenting it. So that one gets dismissed. That's theft.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, as a criminal defense attorney, the best parts of the job, besides being able to stick it to the man, the best parts of the job are having a former client come in and be doing well. And they've put it behind them. They've got, if they had to do treatment, they've got that taken care of. They've started a new life, turned over a new leaf, and it makes me feel good. Unfortunately, the majority of times they are coming back to retain me for some new problem that they've gotten themselves into. They're allegedly breaking the law. And it looks like maybe that's what Jonah Barnes, if this is indeed that Jonah Barnes, did, because theft is theft. And it looks like more than the leopard has trouble changing his spots. But that's not all, because this was 2006 and 2007. And what happens now is in 2012, this Jonah Barnes gets in trouble again. Doggone it. Provo City versus Jonah Ryan Barnes. Now we get the whole middle name, not just our Jonah Ryan Barnes. Can you see that in the title up there at the top on the left, Bill?
I see it. I don't see it on that one, but I see it in the next thing that I've got on my monitor. But I do see Jonah Ryan Barnes listed.
Okay, now are you pushing these forward, or is it coming forward when I turn them?
No, you're in charge of them. I haven't done anything. I've got a second monitor with, I'm a slide ahead of you.
Okay, but we're on Jonah Ryan Barnes, the one that has two sides on it, right?
Yeah, there's another one that has two sides on it that says
the first one. We did that one.
Okay, well then it's not showing up here on the screen. Let me go forward.
Would you please do that for me?
Yep.
Maybe I'm not advancing them.
Now it does. At the very top, Jonah Ryan Barnes, and it lists other things that have happened to him over time.
Yeah, now he gets charged with 4 things. On September 14th, 2012, busy boy, this Jonah Ryan Barnes. Number 1, he got charged with failing to stop at the command of a law enforcement officer, Class A misdemeanor. Number 2, pedestrian to obey traffic control device. So apparently he's jaywalking or something like that. Number 3, disorderly conduct. That's an infraction. And number 4, failure to disclose your identity, obviously upon the lawful request of a law enforcement officer, a Class B misdemeanor. All those in Provo City. So let's see if that's 2012 or 1983. Is that closer to 29 years old now?
Yep, I think so.
I think so. I think that's closer to 29. Actually, 28. He'll turn 29 in December of 2012, I believe. But close enough for government work, right? So, do you think if he's born in 1983, then whoever this Jonah Ryan Barnes is would be 42 years old in December, right? Does that look like the same age as our Ryan or our Jonah Barnes?
I think it is. But again, I don't know that for sure. We'll leave it up to him to say something, or if somebody knows him well enough. But we have the middle name now, so Jonah Ryan Barnes.
Yeah, so this is up to Jonah to admit or deny. And if he doesn't admit it, then it's obviously true.
Right. If he says nothing, if he ignores it.
Yes.
Yes. Otherwise, you just go on and say, hey, those guys pointed this out. That's true. I was a thief at one point. I also was a thief with Watson's material. I've done thievery a few times. It's a den of thieves over here at Ward Radio. We're going to try to do better.
So what they do with these 4 is they do an agreed disposition. They take the last 2, charges 3 and 4, they dismiss them. He pleads guilty to charges 1 and 2. So failing to stop at the command of a law enforcement officer and pedestrian not obeying the traffic control device. 1 a Class A misdemeanor, the second a Class C misdemeanor. They allow him to plead guilty to both of those. So he pleads guilty to those. Then it's set over not 3 months, because this isn't this cat's first rodeo. They set it over for 6 months, not paying $100 anymore. Now it's $300 he's got to pay. So the defendant's plea is held in abeyance, conditions of agreement. Like I say, he's put on it for 6 months. And here's the last page. Can you put that next slide up there, Bill, if it's not up already? So plea in abeyance, additional conditions. He's got to pay the $300 fee. He also has to write a letter of apology to Officer Martin in care of the BYU Police Department within 30 days, because I don't think he was treating Officer Martin with the respect that was due him. And defendant is ordered to complete 20 hours of community service within those 6 months as well. So you can see things are getting a little hotter for this Jonah Barnes upon second and subsequent convictions, and proof of completion to be provided to the court. Well, the good news is that Jonah Barnes did everything he was supposed to do, including writing his letter of apology, etc. And 6 months later, charge 1, which had been pleaded guilty to, it was dismissed, and charge 2, which had been pleaded guilty to, was also dismissed. So I think that's it for. Oh, wait, can you go? Hang on a second. Can you go to the next slide? If you'll give me just a second here. I've got to go to a place where.
While you're doing
can-
that, I'll
yeah.
just say it wouldn't hurt you, Jonah, to write a letter of apology to either Eldon Watson or the community that listens to you for how you presented Eldon Watson's material, as if you were the guy making such incredible breakthrough research and finding such incredible insights. Maybe if you're going to apologize for not identifying yourself to law enforcement, the least you could do is apologize for plagiarism. Seems like it would be decent of you to do so.
It would be. Unfortunately, we don't have the power to put him in jail if he doesn't.
No.
So, but by the way, thank you for going to this slide, because guess what we find out from this slide, which I looked up on the internet. What do we find out from this slide?
We have his middle name right. That much we know. So this would have to be a completely different Jonah Ryan Barnes, not a Jonah Ralph Barnes or Jonah Richard Barnes. This is a Jonah Ryan Barnes. Looks like a 42-year-old male. I don't know.
Looks like a guy who would be up to no good in Provo.
Yeah. With a philtrum like that, you can't trust him.
Over there at the Married Student Housing, I think is where this happened. Yeah, that philtrum, that's a dead giveaway. It's like when your eyes are too far apart. A big philtrum signifies a criminal disposition. Oh, and that's the end. That's the end. What do you think, Bill? Did Brigham Young teach the Adam God theory?
Yeah, Brigham Young taught the Adam God theory. He taught it in the 1800s. Everybody in the 1800s with him knew he was teaching it. And Jonah Barnes' research, ideas, scholarship, all of it's absolutely ridiculous.
And the last question I'll ask you tonight, is Jonah Barnes the lying Mormon apologist who lies?
And steals.
And steals.
Yes, Jonah Barnes is the lying Mormon apologist who lies and steals.
He commits crimes of dishonesty.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for tonight. And guess what? We've got somebody we can bring on. Did you want to announce anything or let people know how they can come on?
I did put it in the live chat. I'll keep putting it out there. So, folks, it is in the live chat right now. If you want to join the show, there is a link there. And you can do what Tim did and just click that link and come into the show.
Tim, how are you doing? And happy Thanksgiving to you tomorrow.
Happy Thanksgiving to you also.
Thank
I'm
you.
doing great. Doing great.
What do you think of this Jonah Barnes stuff? He's gonna have trouble for a while, isn't he?
if I were Jonah Barnes, I would go dig a hole and bury myself as deep as I could for as long as I could. Right now,
Hopefully he'll take Cardin Ellis with him.
the whole
Or somebody
crew,
called him
all of
Cardin
them,
Alice.
the women. Hey, let them build a bunker and just put them all in there for a while. Just bury them.
We've done 3 episodes, mostly RFM, but we've done 3 episodes. I think we've completely annihilated every idea he had and also demonstrated a multitude of times over that Adam God was taught.
Most of what we've demolished is all the ideas that Jonah didn't have.
My.
You're a great audience, Tim. Thank you. I'm glad you called in. What can we do for you? Did you have something you wanted to talk about specifically?
Yes, the stamps on the McConkie letter were put there by Jay Bell. They were not there originally. When Jay
How
got
do you
his
know this? I respect your opinion, but Jay Bell, who is this, and how do you know?
Jay was one of my best friends at BYU, and I have seen the original letter, and it's a green stamp. If you go to the University of Utah, where his papers are, you can pull it, and you'll see it's a green stamp on the letters. He put that on there, and then when he showed it to Ron and Gary, Ron at the 70s Press, Ron went down and made a copy at Kinko's was right downstairs, okay? 70s Press was upstairs, Grandpa's books, and then Kinko's. And Ron went down and made a copy, brought it back and said, Jay, you're not going to share this with anybody, are you? No, not at all. And within a few weeks, the Tanners published their Apostle Admits Adam God booklet. So that's how I know.
So basically, then Brewster McConkie is not the one who stamped confidential all over it.
No, that was Jay.
Okay.
Help me though. What was Jay? Jay puts the stamp on because he's not acting as a middleman for McConkie. He's acting as a person on behalf of who's has the archive of this letter.
I don't know why Jay put that on there. I don't know if we ever talked about that, but
Tried to soothe his conscience.
maybe, yeah. But he didn't want it getting out. And we also have the answer. We also have Gene England's answer to it. That's also in that collection of documents. So we have the letter and we have his response, which makes a complete circle for that.
It's a pretty incredible letter. This is like a one-of-a-kind letter, isn't it?
Yeah. It's very incredible. Yeah. I mean, there are people on Facebook who are arguing with me, telling me that Jonah's right. And I said, well, here's these quotes. Have you read them? No. And I'm not going to.
Well, then you'll probably continue to think the way you have been.
Yeah, that's right.
Confirmation bias is a tricky thing to get someone out of.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Can you imagine how anti-intellectual these guys are? They're brazenly anti-intellectual. Well, they don't. They're in their own little room and the echo chamber, and they just don't want to get out of it. Just give me one example. Why do I have to read 233 quotes? Give me one example. Okay, the lecture at the Veil from the St. George Temple. Oh, that's not good enough. Okay, how about McConkie's admitting that's not good enough either? And I'm going, how much more does this idiot need? It's like,
Because McConkie was obviously wrong, because Jonah Barnes knows more than McConkie knows. He knows more than Robert L. Millett knows. He knows more than Benjamin Park knows. He knows more than Orson Pratt knew.
Yes.
He's a very smart guy.
Yeah. About as smart as a pile of shit.
Robert Boylan agrees with you.
Isn't that crazy? Robert Boylan says this is shitty scholarship.
This is shitty stuff. I mean, the bottom of the barrel, calling the bottom of the barrel is like, wow.
And Boylan's right. There is a distance between him and Jonah Barnes at the very, very bottom of the barrel.
Maybe it's millimeters, but it's something.
It's like being called insensitive by Charlie Manson.
Exactly. Anyway.
Well, thank you, Tim.
Thank you. I just wanted to make that correction.
I'm glad that you did. Thank you. We rely on you.
Okay. Yeah.
I think I'd heard something like that before, but I sure didn't remember.
I did. I mentioned it before. I mentioned it before, but that's okay.
That's where I heard it. It must have been from you, and I forgot.
It was from me. Yeah, it was from me.
Thank you, Tim. You're the best.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. You too, guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Wow. Well, that's about it for tonight. Everybody else I think they were eating turkey by now. We're at 2 hours and 48 minutes. This is the third show we've done about this.
Yeah.
I think this is enough for now, don't you?
We can put
absent any future offenses. This will be our last show about Jonah Barnes for a while.
The difference between us and them is if this was us, first off, we wouldn't do all that shit. We wouldn't plagiarize a bunch of stuff and not give credit, and
especially not Eldon Watson stuff.
And then misportray all the stuff we present differently than it actually is. And but if it was us that did it, we'd come out the next week on Mormonism Live and we would have a conversation and say, hey, we got some things wrong. We want to correct it here so that you, the audience, can be informed about those things. We will watch. And you can tell one's ego and motivation by the silence after it's been demonstrated that one did not act appropriately. And we'll see what Jonah Ryan Barnes does. We'll see if the thief comes forward and announces his thiefdom.
Yeah. I just want to know if he was born in December of 1983. I think was it the 19th?
18th, maybe. Let's go take a look.
Let's see here. I've got it right here, and I can find this. It was. No, wait a
18.
minute. It was 18.
Yep, December 18th, 1983.
If that's your birthday, Jonah Barnes, come on down.
We gotta
You're
send
the
him.
next contestant.
We gotta send him a card on his birthday.
Maybe he'll come on the show on his birthday.
We'll
If we
see.
give him a present.
Great job, RFM.
Thank you so much. And are we about ready to leave here, or what are we going to do on Friday, Bill? I've got to ask you. What are we going to be doing after dark? The Friday after
Are
Thanksgiving.
you still gonna be
I may
out
be.
of town?
Yeah, I am in Austin, Texas right now. On Friday, I'll be in Longview, Texas.
Yeah. What would it? I think my 2 cents is it sounds like it would benefit you, and it's the day after Thanksgiving. It might be good for the listeners to take a break too. If we didn't do a show, but if you have, if you want to, I'll show up. We'll do it. We'll talk about something. I have no idea what, but something will happen between now and then. It might be nice to run through the main data points of Wade Christofferson and allow our audience to have a conversation about that. But we can do that a week from Friday as well.
Yeah, we can do that. I don't want to leave everybody hanging. I mean, it's Thanksgiving weekend,
Yeah.
but it may be a conflict. So I tell you what, let's make a decision now. Let's say we're going to cancel Friday night, everybody. We will be here for the Radio Free Mormon, the 3rd annual Christmas Eve party. So let's let that make up for our not having Mormonism After Dark this Friday. Is that okay?
That's perfect. And sooner or later here in the next little bit, we'll take a little look at what's going on with Wade Christofferson and help people see how egregious this is. Because I think once you see the data points, the church can't exactly wash its hands and get away from this.
There is new stuff coming out, isn't there?
There is stuff coming out on the daily. And I imagine more things are forthcoming.
It's not making it look any better, is it?
No, it's not.
For Wade or the church?
It's not.
All right. Well, we'll certainly cover that a lot more on Monday on the newscast. I know that Rebecca is investigating the hell out of that case. She's amazing, really.
Yeah, she's done a hell of a job.
So good job, Rebecca. Hope you're watching. Everybody, thanks so much for watching. Would you please hit like? If you haven't already, hit that like button. And also, while you're there, could you also hit the subscribe button after you hit the like button? So you'll get notifications of all the great episodes that are coming up. And we won't have to spend a half hour at the end of every show announcing them all. That would be helpful, wouldn't it, Bill? So thanks, everybody. Sorry.
No, it would.
So thanks, everybody, for watching. Please, from the bottom of our hearts, we hope you have a happy Thanksgiving tomorrow. And we won't see you on Friday for Mormonism After Dark, but we will see you on Monday. Hopefully, I'll be there. I'm supposed to be flying back up from Texas to Washington on Monday. So we'll see if I make it up there in time. Hopefully, I will. It's a pretty early flight, and we'll see. But thanks so much, everybody. Have a great Thanksgiving, a great Thanksgiving weekend. Once again, thanks for watching. Hopefully, we'll see you again next Monday on the Mormon Newscast, 6:00 p.m. Mountain Time. See you then. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for this week's edition of the Mormon Newscast. We appreciate you tuning in and